Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Connor in for Ian today. Hello, Connor.
Hello, Jared.
So I want to start today on something that I had to double take when I read. In fact, it's such a, you guys get on me for hot takes. I saw this hot take. I had to double take. The writer put it in italics. Because it's like, wait a minute, hold on. He said what? So Brian Callahan, the Titans head coach, has spent the entire offseason pumping Will Levis's tires. Now, I will give him credit because when he got the job, he didn't sit there and say, I think Will's a franchise quarterback or anything like that. But he started off by saying, hey, everything, it's a clean slate with me. The mayonnaise in the coffee, who knows? We'll see, all that. So I give him credit for that he didn't come out the gate right away and just pump all the sunshine. But it has been nothing but sunshine pumping since the offseason program has begun. And yesterday it hit a high when he told SI that he doesn't think there's anybody in the draft class better than Caleb Williams or better than Will Levis. That means that he is basically saying Will Levis is better, in his opinion, than Caleb Williams. Albert Breer with the exact quote, if Will's coming out in this draft class, I don't know that I feel like anybody is better than him at this point. Again, I think he's better than Caleb Williams. Now, could Will Levis be better than Caleb Williams? Absolutely. And I'm not even a huge Caleb Williams fan. But to sit there and say that Will Levis, 3-6 last year as a starter, we went over yesterday the Bill Barnwell article that had all the nerdy analytics about just how terrible Levis was, that it was Trevor Siemian level bad. Not sure I'm taking him over Caleb Williams, because I don't believe that he's better than Caleb Williams, and I'm not sure anybody else thinks that either. But I'm glad Brian Callahan said this. I'm glad that for the umpteenth time, whether it is at the press conferences here, whether it is in a rainbow interview with Mike Keith, whether it is the Athletic Football Podcast, whether it's Bussin' with the Boys, whatever it may be, Sports Illustrated, he's been consistent. He believes in Will Levis. He is all in on Will Levis. He thinks Will Levis can be a franchise quarterback, period. Which means one of two things. One, he loves Levis, thinks he can be a superstar, and I get that. Because I do think that Levis does have superstar potential. I mean, he's got really good talent. I've told you, I could see Dan Marino on one side, and I can see a backup quarterback on the other. Sam Howell and Levis have a lot of similarity. I see a little Matthew Stafford in Will Levis. So he could really love him. That's the first thing that all of this, just the Will Levis on fire tour with Brian Callahan, this could be simply that, well, he really, really thinks he's good and that he believes in him. That'd be great if that's the case. Or two, it could be that Brian Callahan is just a total bobo for his own team. Just everybody's doing great. Everything's awesome. And if that's going to be the case, if he's going to be that positive all the time, then we probably need to take his words as seriously as we take, say, the modern-day color analyst on a home radio broadcast. And maybe that's just how he is about everybody. Everybody's the best. I don't like it, but again, we live in this affirmation society where people want to hear things so other people say them. But here's what all this means for me. Just, the constant barrage of positive reinforcement from Brian Callahan about his belief and feelings in his quarterback. Brian responsibility for Will Levis. What exactly does that mean? Well, GMs and coaches usually get one quarterback of their choice. Two quarterbacks if you're lucky. Some GMs and coaches, if you get a good quarterback, then you can get a second quarterback of your choice. But again, for the most part, you get one crack at a quarterback. Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas with the Jets, they're a little lucky that Aaron Rodgers wanted to play for him, because if not, they'd have been shipped out of town because Zach Wilson stunk. You only get one crack at it. But Brian Callahan didn't draft Will Levis. Brian Callahan didn't scout Will Levis. So Brian Callahan has plausible deniability if Will Levis fails. Just like, say, Matt Eberflus in Chicago, he and Ryan Poles, they didn't draft Justin Fields, even though when they took the job, Fields had been in the league for a year, and they had him for 2 years, and they didn't win anything, and they didn't develop him, and they didn't do a good job, and they fired the offensive coordinator. It's okay, they get another crack at it, because technically that was the other guys who drafted him, not these guys. So again, he's got the plausible deniability. That's not my guy. I didn't draft him. But I've decided that since Brian Callahan has firmly planted his flag on Will Levis Island, and Rand Carthon did draft Levis, even though a lot of people pretend like Carthon didn't draft the underachieving guard with the 11th overall pick. And again, I don't understand. I still, to this day, and I'll probably never understand because it really doesn't make a lot of sense, I do not understand how, as a general manager, again, thinking that you only get one crack at a quarterback choice. Again, 2 if you're lucky. But, I mean, Bill Belichick got 2 quarterbacks. Tom Brady, Mac Jones. See ya. And he might be the greatest coach who ever lived. But again, I can't imagine being a general manager and saying, okay, I've got one crack at a quarterback like every other general manager, but I'm going to take the guard first. Like that one, again, somebody will have to explain to me how that works. I don't get it. But again, I guess you people are all smarter than me. So what this does, though, is to me, this idea of Brian Callahan, if it doesn't work out with Levis, saying, oh, no, that's not my guy. Or I should say really kind of the narrative being made for him. If it doesn't work out with Levis, and we're sitting there midway through next year, and we're thinking, oh, God, this team, they're going to be terrible. They have no quarterback. They're 4-13. Levis can't play. He's no good. Well, we can't blame Brian Callahan because Brian Callahan didn't draft Will Levis. Well, Brian Callahan just told you. I'd draft him today over Caleb Williams. I'd draft him today over Jaden Daniels. I'd draft him today over Drake May. That's his quarterback now. That's not his quarterback because he adopted the quarterback. It's his quarterback because he has put a ring on it with just all of the over-the-top praise for a guy that he's known for 4 or 5 months. Carthon, Callahan, and Levis. Put them all together. If they fail, they all end up fired. If they succeed, they will all be very, very rich men. Levis, most certainly, because he'll be making north of $50 million a year. But Callahan and Carthon will earn contract extensions if Levis is the guy, and they should, because the number one job of any administration in the NFL is to figure out the quarterback position. But what I am sick of doing, and bad franchises, like the Jets, like the Bears, unfortunately, kind of like you, what bad franchises do far too often is they play the game of musical blame, which is one day we're all mad at the coach. The next day after we fire the coach, we're all mad at the quarterback. The next day after we go get a new quarterback, we're all mad at the general manager. One day it's the coach, one day it's the QB, one day it's the GM. I mean, even here, when the Titans kind of started their previous era, right, the John Robinson era, it was John Robinson, Mike Mularkey, and Marcus Mariota. And at first, everybody blamed Mike Mularkey. Now, the idea of blaming the coach who got the team to the playoffs for the first time in a decade and won a playoff game for the first time in like 15 years, getting the blame still is hysterical. But Mularkey was the one. He was holding Mariota back. He and Rubisky, that great Marcus Mariota, I think the line Clay Travis said was parking the Ferrari in the garage because they turned around, they handed the ball to DeMarco Murray. Like that is literally how the fan base felt. The Titans made it to the divisional round of the playoffs. Mularkey got fired, and the fan base celebrated. Because, again, in musical blame, he was the guy to blame. Wasn't John Robinson's fault. John Robinson was doing a great job, you guys said. In J-Rob we trust, I think that was kind of the motto around here. Then all of a sudden, Mike Vrabel comes in. They go get the guy from the Rams, and it's like, all right, let's unleash Mariota. Mariota gets hurt. Mariota doesn't play in the play-in game against the Colts. All of a sudden, now it's Mariota who's on the hot seat. It's not Mike Vrabel's fault. Titans start off 2-4, fire the quarterback. And I will tell you this right now. If Ryan Tannehill hadn't magically carried the team to the AFC title game that year, John Robinson would not have been far behind it. Because that is what we do around here. That, again, is what bad franchises do. Musical blame. Is it the QB? Is it the coach? Is it the GM? Even right now, last year, team stunk. Who got the blame? Vrabel. Why? Because the quarterback was new and the GM was new. Can't blame the quarterback. Can't blame the GM. He's not culpable for drafting the guard that doesn't play very well with the 11th overall pick. Can't blame him for the appendectomy. But it was big, bad Vrabel. He was the one. That offensive line was terrible. You want to know why the line was terrible? The coaching of the line was horrendous last year, and that is Vrabel's fault. But let's not kid ourselves. Bill Callahan is not winning with Andre Dillard and Aaron Brewer and Dylan Radins at right tackle. And again, Radins was actually okay last year. But Bill Callahan is not winning with that group. But again, in musical blame, we got to pick somebody, we got to point the finger, so we fire the coach. Well, I don't believe in that. I think that is lazy. I think that is, hey, today it's your fault. Tomorrow it's going to be his fault. The next day it's his fault. And it's a trap. Because what happens is, and I'll use the Chicago Bears as an example. The Chicago Bears had John Fox, Ryan Pace, and they drafted Mitchell Trubisky. They weren't good. You know why they weren't good? Because you don't win with rookie quarterbacks traditionally in the NFL. Yes, I know Ben Roethlisberger won 15 games as a rookie. Again, traditionally, you don't win with rookie quarterbacks in the NFL. So John Fox got the blame in Chicago. He got fired. Then a couple years later, they get, Trubisky's not very good. And so he gets fired. Then Ryan Poles gets fired, but they've already drafted Justin Fields. Now, they hired a new coach, Matt Nagy, to work with Trubisky. But then when they drafted Justin Fields, they taught him an entire offense for a year, got fired, because, again, you don't win with rookie quarterbacks, and now you have to start over again for Fields. See, that's what's going to happen around here if the Titans are bad, and the musical blame continues. The Titans spent a boatload of money this offseason. Now, they didn't spend as much money as everybody makes it out to be, because everybody's talking about the Titans like they're the biggest spenders in the NFL, and that's not true. They have a middle-of-the-road payroll, but they did spend $150 million, and that is something. But if they don't win, the GM will get blamed. And what I've noticed about ownership with the Titans is they listen to the fans. When the fans turn on somebody, the owner turns on somebody. I don't like it, but it is reality. And the fans are either going to blame the quarterback or they're going to blame the general manager. They're not going to blame the coach because, again, he's new. Can't blame him. We're playing musical blame. That's what we always do. So let's say the team's terrible. And Carthon's the guy who gets the blame next. What are you going to do? Fire him? And then hire a new GM? You're not going to fire Brian Callahan. He just got here. And so now you're going to have, a coach, and you're going to hire a GM who didn't pick the coach. And again, you're going to run into the same problem you ran into last year. And so what I've decided is that with Brian Callahan, at every opportunity he gets, going out of his way to talk about how much he believes in Will Levis, I'm putting Will Levis on him. I said, when Will Levis got drafted, I said, hey, man, like Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon's tenures are going to be decided by this guy because he probably won't play this upcoming season. Tannehill's the quarterback. But then after that, if he doesn't make it, they're going to fire him because when you try out a quarterback and it doesn't work, you lose. see Sam Howell. I said, look, I mean, if it doesn't work, these guys are getting fired. Well, Vrabel has gotten fired. And I think in large part probably because the Titans didn't think that he could coach up Will Levis, which I think is a valid belief. Well, now that Brian Callahan has told everybody he thinks he can coach Will Levis, let's put them all together and see if they can do it. And see, what I like about this is now everybody needs everybody. Now Brian Callahan doesn't have in his back pocket I didn't draft him, I didn't scout him, don't blame me. Rand Carthon, who once again doesn't get blamed for Andre Dillard, doesn't get blamed for Aaron Brewer, doesn't get blamed for that terrible team last year. It was injuries and the ball didn't bounce their way. But he can't finagle his way out of this. Well, I drafted Will Levis for Vrabel. I didn't draft him for Brian Callahan. I drafted him for Vrabel. No. Let's put them all together. If Levis doesn't work, everybody's fired. How does everybody feel about that? And then that's when the real question comes to Brian Callahan of, do you really believe in Will Levis that much? It's easy to tell Sports Illustrated, oh yeah, I don't know if Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, Drake May is better than him. It's easy to do that. Do you actually believe it, though? Do you actually believe that this guy's that good? Because if you do, would you be willing to put your career on him? And I'm saying, hey, words mean something. So for me, these words mean I'm putting this on Brian Callahan. Congratulations, Coach. You've now hitched your wagon. 615-737-1025. Chris Sanders, earlier than normal, will join us next here on the program. We'll get his reaction just to, again, all of the praise for Levis and everything else, and then we will get into your phones on this, 615-737-1025. Let's talk Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love my friends at Hiller. They do a fantastic job. Have you ever had a contractor coming to your home all day and it take forever? You feel like you've wasted your whole day? Well, when you call Hiller, you will not have to camp out all day waiting, because you can be a happy camper this month with 0% interest financing for 24 months on select HVAC systems, generators, tankless water heaters. Or you can take advantage of Hiller's $99 drain cleaning special. If you got a bad drain, that's what you want to do. Take care of your home systems before the peak summer temperatures hit, and they are coming. So visit happyhiller.com today for details. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller. Call the Happy Face truck today. Stillman and Company, the Titans did have OTAs today, and there were a lot of names that weren't there. According to TD's Twitter, not spotted DeAndre Hopkins, Colton Dow, though Colton Dow's coming back from an ACL tear. Nick Westbrook-Akine, I'm surprised by that. L'Jarius Sneed, shocker. Kenneth Murray, Harold Landry, Jalen Duncan, Nicholas Petit-Frere, Tavondre Sweat, TK McClendon, and Jeffrey Simmons not at Titans OTAs today. But again, the big story, Brian Callahan telling Sports Illustrated that he told Rand Carthon, quote, if Will's coming out in this draft class, I don't know that I feel like anybody is better than him at this point. Now, he does kind of couch it, right? Like, I don't know. I didn't say he's better than Caleb Williams. But again, the point is, he thinks he's up there with Williams, Daniels, May. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I'm not a Caleb Williams fan, so I would have drafted, but I still would have drafted Caleb Williams over Will Levis. And I do like Will Levis, and I liked him coming out. Chris Sanders joins us now on the program. Chris, do you think that Brian Callahan, who has spent all of the offseason program talking about how much he loves Will Levis, do you think he actually loves Will Levis that much, or do you think this is a confidence thing? Do you think this is a morale thing, a pump the tires thing?
I mean, I think it's both. I mean, you definitely want to build confidence in your quarterback because he's going to lead your team. But at the end of the day, you want to feel comfortable with the guy that you have that's kind of leading the charge. And in my opinion, I went out to practice last week, and I was just kind of serving. I just kind of watching. I wanted to see how things would operate. I want to see how, Callahan was coaching up, Will Levis. If you look at the whole situation, I really believe, on the outside looking in, I really believe that he has confidence in Will Levis because Will Levis was leading a lot of things. He was talking. He was chirping. He was the actual leader on offense. So even though, a lot of times you think that he's really kind of blowing smoke, but just kind of watching it firsthand, you can kind of tell that he really believes in Will Levis.
So I think there's a chance Will Levis, given his natural God-given ability with the football, the way he can push it outside the numbers, I think that if he completely maxes everything out, he's Dan Marino. If he doesn't, I think he's Sam Howell. I think that and it is what it is. With that, though, being said, if you were in Brian Callahan's shoes, if you had to bet your career on Will Levis, what % chance would you give it that he can be Dan Marino, that you think that you'll make him Dan Marino?
I would say 78%.
78?
I would. I mean, he's got a lot of things going for him, and I know a lot of people don't like Will Levis, but what I saw a little bit of last year when he played in the Atlanta game, he threw 3 or 4 touchdowns. He played in the Chargers game, and he looked pretty good in that game. So there's some potential there. The only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is sometimes he takes risks that he doesn't need to take. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. Yes, he has a strong arm. Yes, he does some things. Or yes, he can run with the football. But the only thing that I'm just a little bit concerned about is taking those risks when he don't need to take those risks.
So my biggest concern with Levis is injuries because he's been injured each of the last 2 years.
Absolutely.
And then my second concern is the idea of the game being mental. I think sometimes people think it's about putting the work in, about watching the tape and, learning the defenses and getting with the coaching. But you know as well as I do that there are a lot of guys that are on the surface smart enough to be able to do this, and they work hard enough at it. But in the heat of the moment, they just can't connect the dots fast enough. And a quarterback, that's the most important position in order to be able to do that. I wonder how much – how certain are we that Levis will be able to connect the dots as all of this stuff goes through?
I mean, Jay, that's a great question. I mean, we're going to have to see. And if you kind of look at – there's a guy that I'm going to talk about that everybody knows about is Tom Brady. What made Tom Brady so special is because he understood coverages. He understood what guys are doing, and he understood the whole game. It's like, say if you're in cover 2, and cover 2 is 2 safeties in the corners playing the flat. He understood that if one of the safeties are being antsy, when I say antsy, their body language is telling you that I need to be somewhere. When he understood that and he saw that, he knew where his game plan was before the ball was even hiked. that's the same thing with Will Levis. Will Levis has to get to that point. Everybody knows he has a strong arm. Everybody knows he can run. Everybody knows he's tough. But what's going to take his game to the next level as anticipating the coverage? If it's cover 2 and the safety's been having a bad body language or feeling that he has to be somewhere, then he's got to make the proper read before the ball's even snapped. So if Will Levis can do that, then now his game is going to go from okay to being a good quarterback in this league.
Chris Sanders is with us. Earlier today, Calvin Ridley talked about Treylon Burks and compared his athleticism to that of Julio Jones or T.O. or A.J. Brown. Or how much confidence do you have in Treylon Burks? Because the Titans seem to love him, and I don't.
You know, it's a word that I really, really hate is potential, and all potential is hidden ability. And right now, you know, Treylon Burks has a lot of potential. We saw when he played against Alabama in college and he took over the game, and then you saw some splashes of the last 2 years when he played against I think it was the Philadelphia Eagles when he caught a touchdown and got hurt. The potential's there. But I just think that with Treylon Burks, there's need to be consistency and a little bit of confidence. In my opinion, I believe in him. The reason why I believe in him because the potentials are there. So if I'm the wide receiver coach, and that's Coach Tolbert, which is doing a great job with all those receivers out there, I'm going just like I said before, I'm going to push the X and O's aside. I'm going to sit him down and I'm going to inflate this guy with confidence. I'm going to tell him what he needs to work on. Yes, I'm going to keep him accountable in that aspect. But as a coach, I need to fill him up with confidence. So if he plays with confidence and plays fast, then now you're going to see that hidden ability come to fruition. I believe he can do that.
Chris Sanders is our guest. DeAndre Hopkins not at OTAs today, and somebody texted into the text line and said that DeAndre Hopkins has removed all Titans, pictures off of his Instagram or whatever.
What?
So I do wonder, what do you make of that? DeAndre is in the last year of a deal, and DeAndre is underpaid. So I do wonder what you make of all of that. Could there be some trouble brewing underneath with DeAndre, or could DeAndre just not have been there today?
Yeah, I mean, that could be the case, but that's the one thing that, listen, I'm kind of concerned about just a little bit because, listen, you're dealing with DeAndre Hopkins, you're dealing with Calvin Ridley. Both of the guys want the football. And then you got Tyler Boyd that's in the slot. So now you got a situation. I'm going to give the listeners a scenario. Just imagine it's 4th and 5, the game's on the line, and they throw the ball to Tyler Boyd. How is Calvin Ridley and how is D-Hop going to how are they going to act? Because you know if you're a number one guy, you're going to want the football. You're going to want to make the play at the right time. So that's the only thing that I was concerned because you got two alpha males on the outside that want the football when the game's on the line. And if you look at it, I'm not trying to go back and kind of compare to how we did in 1999. We had some great players. We had myself. We had Derek Mason, who's a great player. We had Kevin Dyson. We had Yancey Thigpen. We had, Bird. The one thing that made that room work is because everybody knew their role and nobody cared. So now you got a whole bunch of dudes in this locker room. You got Calvin Ridley, you got Hop, you got, Tyler Boyd. You got all these guys that want the football. If you don't get the ball, will you make it work and know your role? That's the only thing that I'm concerned about.
What do you think about Nicholas Petit-Frere? Second week in a row, he was not present in OTAs, and same with T'Vondre Sweat. Let's start with Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. Chris.
PT.
Your thoughts on PT not being either there or available today for OTAs?
I think he needs – this is my opinion. As a player, if I know that the right tackle position is open, I don't care if the door's locked. I'm going to find a way to get in there to prepare myself to get better. The disappointing that, and I don't know the situation. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know what he's doing.
I think he is hurt. At least that's what I kind of heard behind the scenes last week. But again, can't make the club if you're in the tub.
Right. See, yeah, exactly. So that might be the case where he's hurt, but even if he's hurt, I'm still going to be in the building. I'm going to get with my O-line coach, which is Bill Callahan, and get with him and even talk to him and even be on the sidelines, even if I'm not actually on the field. So it is. I'm not saying it's disappointing. I just want him to be there because this is a perfect opportunity to show everybody and to showcase that you can be on that offensive line and make an impact.
What about T'Vondre Sweat? Again, not out there for the second week in a row.
Yeah, I think he definitely needs to be there because here's what you got to understand. When they start to get into camp, you're not going to have that many practices. If I'm him, I don't know the situation. I don't know if he's hurt. I'm being careful because I don't know his situation. But if I'm here and I'm available and I'm in talent and I need to be there, I'm going to be there because the thing about it is if I get drafted in the second round, that means they're depending on me. They're saying, okay, I need you to come in here to perform. So if I'm Sweat, I'm going to be in the coach's face. Even if I can't practice, I'm going to be on the sidelines, actually listen, take a mental rest. So in that situation, I don't know, but as for me, and I'm in that position, I'm going to make sure I'm there to show the team that I'm ready and ready to go.
Chris Sanders, as always, joins us on a Wednesday this week a little bit earlier, but always great stuff. A 78% belief that Will Levis will become a Dan Marino-like franchise quarterback.
Oh, my God. Is that too high?
I mean, I'm at 50-50. I can see this going either way.
Gosh.
I'm right there in the middle. So if you want to be optimistic about it, I think 65 is probably the max you can get without being crazy. And you went 78%.
Okay, let's go 70%.
No. You already said 78. Chris Sanders, he is the best. Chris, great stuff. Appreciate you as always. Take care of yourself. Chris Sanders on the program. Again, a 78% chance. But listening to Brian Callahan's comments, again, he said he'd take him over Caleb Williams. And I don't even like Caleb Williams. And I'm like, sometimes you got to recognize, even if you don't personally like a prospect, you have to recognize the generational talented prospects. And Williams is in that group. You know, the Trevor Lawrence group, he's in it. And again, Trevor Lawrence hasn't become a huge superstar. He's kind of a disappointment. But that's that potential group. And Brian Callahan said, I don't know if these guys are better than Levis. I'm like, okay, now, that's your quarterback. 615-737-1025. There was a little snippet in the SI article. Brian Callahan said something that I don't know if at 25 years old, which is what Will Levis will be, I don't really know that he can fix. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman and Company right here, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Really, really happy with the work that he's put in, what he's learned. There's a lot of information coming at him, a lot of technical things, a lot of mental things, a lot of physical things as far as fundamentals, techniques, how we teach, what we teach. He's attacked it with really awesome enthusiasm. Every day he comes in, he learns it, and always the mark to me of guys that take coaching well, they can take it from the meeting room to the grass. And so he's been able to translate those things as we've come out here. So really happy with the work he's done so far. I think he's really gotten better in a short amount of time because of the way he approaches his job, and that's all you can ask for at this point in the year.
That was Brian Callahan talking about Will Levis. And so, again, Brian Callahan, SI, saying, I don't know if anybody in this draft's better than Will Levis. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. Now, there was a line in the SI article that caught my attention. It was after they were, sitting down with Albert Breer, and they were doing a film study, Callahan, Levis, and Breer. And there was a play against the Falcons where Levis didn't take the check down, and he fired a ball deep, and Traylon Burks ended up dropping it. Surprise. Traylon Burks ended up dropping the football, and yet the throw, as Brian Callahan says, it was a terrible decision, terrible mechanics, terrible, but the throw was incredible. And Callahan says in the SI piece, quote, first of all, decision-making can be coached. That right there, again, the throw itself, Callahan says that right there, you don't coach that. Will's mom and dad gave that to him. Now, let me say this. I'm not completely sure that decision-making is all on the coach. I do believe that coaches can help with decision-making. But at the end of the day, the quarterback position is the hardest position to play, obviously, because you're responsible for knowing where everybody is at one time, and you're not only responsible for knowing where all 10 of your guys are, but you got to know where all 11 of their guys are too. And you only have a split second. You only get about 16 seconds or so after you break the huddle to be able to analyze what the defense is doing, and then you get a split second to make a decision with a guy barreling down on you, with the guy that might be open that you got to throw. It is a very difficult position to play. And I don't know if that ability, that decision, I don't really know if that can be coached. Did Brian Callahan coach Peyton Manning how to make good decisions? I'm going to guess no. Did Brian Callahan coach Joe Burrow, who was the best player in America at LSU? Did he coach Joe Burrow on how to make good decisions? Again, I have a hard time believing that Joe wasn't pretty close to a finished product when he showed up in Cincinnati. And so where I sit, when I'm looking at these, and I'm saying to myself, okay, can you really coach out the bad decisions from Will Levis? I saw Tim Kelly last year in a game at Tampa Bay. I saw Tim Kelly go. Tampa Bay had scored early in the fourth quarter to give themselves a 14-point lead. And Levis came out and threw a hero ball on the next play. And at that point, Tim Kelly realized, okay, we are not putting the ball deep down the field because he's trying to win it all back on one throw. So we're going to call these bubble screens for Kyle Phillips. Now, it actually worked, and they moved the ball down the field at least a little bit. But that right there, can Levis come to the sideline and you explain to him, hey, that's not open there. Instead, you needed this. Can you do that? And the hard part is there's no way to know. No matter how excited Brian Callahan is during the offseason, there's no way for him to know right now if Levis really can take it from the classroom to the grass because, again, nobody's going to hit him in practice. So he can get the ball and they can run it on air, but he doesn't have Jeffrey Simmons, coming down on him. Week 1, you play the Chicago Bears. That's Montez Sweat. And you're throwing against Jalen Johnson. And the other thing I'll say about decision-making and coachability and things like that, I think guys get better, especially the guys that are smart. And Levis, you saw his S2 score, which is the retention and kind of the split-second decision-making. Levis had a very strong S2 score, which is good. But when it comes to the live bullets and it comes to the real game and it comes to, you're not going to know if he can do that. And for some guys, they're not good decision makers. They're still good quarterbacks. Brett Favre. Brett Favre's not a great decision maker. Good quarterback. So there's a little give and take here. But I don't want to say it sounds cocky for Brian Callahan to say, well, we can coach up the bad decisions, because that is his job. It's to work through it. It's to, again, for sure. But I just don't know, decision-making and accuracy are the two most important things for a quarterback. And while both of them can be improved, I don't think you can take a quarterback that makes bad decisions. I don't think you can take Nathan Peterman and coach him on how to make good decisions. I don't think you can take a Ryan Fitzpatrick. And again, Ryan Fitzpatrick's one of the smartest guys to ever play in the NFL. I don't think you can take Ryan Fitzpatrick and just say, hey, I want you to do this or I want you to do that, because he's going to wing the ball at the end of the day. Derek Carr is going to do stupid stuff. I don't care who his coach is. So I don't know necessarily that he could, I can coach up the decision. I don't know about that. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHonda.com, 615-737-1025. One texter says, quit being naive. Brian Callahan's doing that to pump up Will Levis's confidence. See, I don't like that, because yes, I understand the idea of, hey, I'm just trying to get this guy to know that I believe in him. I understand that. But you also don't want to gaslight an entire fan base into thinking you've got Dan Marino, when in reality you've got J.P. Lossman, and he goes out there and throws like it, and all of a sudden you're year one into this and you're 4-13. And that's not going to do you any favors, because you've gotten everybody excited. Bob says, is Brian Callahan supposed to say something other than, I love Will Levis to the public? I talked about this yesterday. I'm probably going to have to talk about this a lot between now and then, because the Titans, and this is not a Brian Callahan thing, this is a Titans thing. I think the Titans have a almost toxic positivity culture, or a culture of toxic positivity. I think the Titans have. I think if you raise any question marks, they get rid of you. They only want to hear good things in that building. But I do think there's a difference between everybody's the best and, I really like working with Will. Now, there's a lot of work that's ahead of us, but so far he's done a lot of the work, and I'm very encouraged, and I like working with him. There's a difference between that, and I take him over Caleb Williams. Those are two different things. More your phone, 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. Let's talk Window Nation. That's right. I love Window Nation. It is Window Nation's semi-annual sale, and it's a big deal. Right now, get 50% off all windows along with no interest for 5 years, plus bonus savings when you schedule a consult today. I know Window Nation is a company you can trust, because when I had the consult with Window Nation, they looked at my windows and they said, you don't need to replace your windows. I said, you serious? They said, yeah, you've got good windows. And that moment hit me. I didn't say it to them when they were at my home at the time, but I knew it. I'm like, man, here is a salesperson coming to my home to sell me windows, and they're telling me you don't need new windows. Basically wasting 2 hours, 3 hours, however long it took them to get of their day. That's a really trustworthy company. So I can't tell you about the other window companies. I can only tell you about Window Nation. And I can tell you that they are a trustworthy company, and I love them. Window Nation, again, with the semi-annual sale, 50% off all windows, no interest for 5 years, bonus savings when you schedule the consult. That's 866-90-NATION, or visit windownation.com. Again, if your windows are leaky, foggy, hot this time of year, get it done before the peak summer temperatures roll in. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com.
How's Devondre Sweat coming along?
He's been great. He's been great. I mean, he's been plenty of work. He falls in the same boat as all the rookies do. You know, he's going to make plenty of mistakes, but everything those guys have done, he's put the work in. He's done a nice job in the meeting room and translating things to the field. So that part's been exciting.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan last week talking about Devondre Sweat. But Devondre Sweat last week wasn't on the practice field at OTAs. And today, according to TD, Devondre Sweat was not on the practice field at OTAs again today. Now, last week after Sweat didn't practice, PK came out and said, I have it on good authority that it's a minor injury Sweat's working through. Again, one practice and Devondre Sweat got hurt last week. And now here we are a week later and Devondre Sweat is still not out on the field. Now, I have no idea what this means long term. Somebody texted into the text line, Skylar texted in and said, how worried should we be about Sweat and Sneed not being at OTAs for multiple days? Well, when it comes to L'Jarius Sneed, I mean, again, we knew the knees were a problem. Like, when you buy a car at clearance because it doesn't have a clean title, you know why you're getting that car at a discount. When it comes to L'Jarius Sneed, you got him for a third-round pick next year, even though when he's healthy, he might be one of the best corners in the NFL because he's got terrible knees. So that doesn't surprise me. I think it's a red flag a lot of you choose to overlook, but that doesn't surprise me. The second thing, though, is Sweat. How concerned should we be about Sweat? And all I'll say is this. When the Titans drafted Treylon Burks, Bruce Feldman at The Athletic talked to college coaches, their thoughts on these draft prospects. And one coach told Bruce Feldman at The Athletic that Treylon Burks was a biscuit shy of being a flexed out tight end. Burks shows up the first day at rookie minicamp, and he can't even make it through the whole thing because he was so out of shape. And they made every excuse in the book for Treylon Burks, which was he has asthma, it was hot outside, he was doing all the combine training, so he wasn't doing football training. But they didn't change reality. Again, teams were turned off in the draft process because Burks didn't run as fast as they thought he would at the combine and because Burks was out of shape in some of the private workouts. Well, how did Treylon Burks' rookie year go? So all I really have to judge Devondre Sweat, again, a guy with serious red flags concerning his weight, all I have to go off of this guy goes through one practice, is hurt, and has been rehabbing ever since, seems unreliable to me. Now, a lot of people say, it's too early to say that, Jared, and you're right, it is. That's why I'm not yelling and screaming. But it's not a good sign. The idea that, hey, we're going to take this guy at 38, even though he might be unreliable, and the first two open practices that he has, he's not out there because he's already hurt, that's a concern. An injury is a major concern when it comes to guys that are out of shape. So to answer your question, how worried should we be about Devondre Sweat? I will tell you, worried. And you should be allowed to be worried when it comes to Devondre Sweat. Lenny says they need to release Malik Willis. I could not care at all. Could not care about Malik Willis. One texter goes, Jared, I listen to your show because you're not a Titans homer, but you have too many extreme takes just to get a reaction. What's the take? What's the extreme take? In fact, I just told you right in the last one. I said, I'm not too concerned about Devondre Sweat, but it is a bad sign. And I remember when we made every excuse for Treylon Burks, and that's not to say that Devondre Sweat's going to be Treylon Burks. But I do remember when we did that. And we were like, well, what matters is training camp, and how was Burks' rookie season? But again, what's the extreme take today? That Brian Callahan going all in on Will Levis should be a sign that, hey, Brian Callahan should own Will Levis? That if Will Levis becomes Dan Marino, that Brian Callahan should get the credit? And if he fails, I don't want this, oh, well, I didn't draft him, I didn't sign him, I don't want any of that. I'm not interested in that. That's the extreme take you don't like? Like, that's the one you don't like? That's the one that bothers you? Maybe you should go listen to the Titans homers. You will hear things that you like a lot more than you'll hear. Oh, did you hear what the coach said? The coach said he's better than Caleb Williams. Oh, my God, did you hear that? Did you? Oh, my goodness gracious. But as far as like this idea of like, Jared, this is a shtick of you to say that Brian Callahan's saying that. To me, that's the hot take. I mean, I don't even like Caleb Williams, but I do view him as a better prospect than Will Levis, and so does 99.9% of America. So to say that, I don't even think that he would be better than Will Levis coming out right now, that's the hot take, not mine. Unbelievable. Kyle is up next here on the program. Thank you for waiting. What's up, Kyle?
What's going on, Jared? I'm a big Will Levis fan, and I think secretly you are too. You believe in him just as much as I do.
I absolutely do not believe in him as much as you do. I believe in him. I like him. I liked him coming out. I would have drafted him with the 11th overall pick instead of the guard, but I do not like him as much as you, who thinks he's a franchise quarterback already.
Just those Pittsburgh throws got me going. But you're talking about throwing the deep ball, his anxiety, trying to win it all with one play. There's another great quarterback that like to do that, Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid got with him for 2 years and settled him down, and he's taking what the defense is giving you. You know as well as I do, Will Levis is smart. He'll figure out what the defense is giving him. Don't have to take such big hits on long drop backs. He's got this.
So, Kyle, I appreciate your call. I was talking to my dad about this last night because we were talking about, we played the cuts yesterday on the program that Brady was on with Cowherd. Thank you, Kyle. That Brady was on with Cowherd and was talking about how quarterbacks develop and how it's more than just does the quarterback have the talent to do it, but the situation the quarterback goes into. Patrick Mahomes. Now, fans don't want to hear this. I remember the day after Mahomes was drafted, Chris Carter was on TV, the Hall of Fame wide receiver, and he said, I don't understand why Patrick Mahomes has to sit. If he's so good, why can't he play right now? I want the cookies right now. But Andy Reid drafted him, say he's going to sit. And I said to my dad, Mahomes might end up being the best quarterback who ever lived. I think it's Brady right now, but it doesn't mean that Mahomes can't pass Brady down the road. How much of Mahomes' success is because Mahomes went to the team with the best offensive quarterback coach, with the best tight end, the fastest wide receiver, and sat a year on the bench behind Alex Smith, who was willing to let Mahomes learn. Mahomes' dad played Major League Baseball. I actually played for the Sounds, too. And when he got to the big leagues, he went up to Jack Morris, another Hall of Famer. And he said to Jack Morris, can you teach me something? Jack Morris, I'm not teaching you anything. You're trying to take my job. And he said he was shocked by the way that Alex Smith let Mahomes in, knowing that Mahomes was there to take his job. And if Mahomes had gone to the Jets, in that same draft, the 2017 draft, Titans had the 5th pick, they took Corey Davis. The 6th pick belonged to the Jets, who took Jamal Adams. I thought the Jets should have gone quarterback there and taken Deshaun Watson because I didn't think Geno Smith was very good. If the Jets had taken Mahomes there, do you think Mahomes would be Mahomes? If he didn't go to a team where he could sit on the bench, where he could fly under the radar, where he had Andy Reid as his coach, where he had the fastest wide receiver, he had the best tight end, do you think he'd be Mahomes? And there's no way to know this. I don't think he would be. Well, right now, you don't have Tyreek, Kelsey, and Andy Reid. Could Callahan be that guy? Maybe. Could Ridley and Hopkins be it? Maybe. But to sit there and say, hey, we're going to turn him into Mahomes, it's like, whoa now. Mahomes was coached up by the guru of gurus. Andy had Kelsey. Andy had Hill. Andy had Alex Smith caddying along for him. Levis was thrown in the fire last year with no tackles. And by the way, when Mahomes broke into the league, he had a veteran left tackle that had been drafted number 1 overall in the draft. You've got PT. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So I do push back against this whole Will Levis is the greatest talk. But there was an opinion from somebody that I actually trust, somebody who I have respect for, somebody who Floyd Reese had respect for. And boy, you ain't going to like it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So last week, we went through all the quarterbacks in the NFL, and I said there were 19 guys that I'd rather have than Will Levis. 19, which, again, I think is fair. In fact, let me pull that list up and run through these quarterbacks for you because, again, I think that it was probably, pretty fair. The 19 guys that I had that I would take over Will Levis: Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Lamar, Justin Herbert, Stafford, Rodgers, Stroud, Hurts, Goff, Prescott, Cousins, Lawrence, Love, Mayfield, Purdy, Williams, Richardson, and Bryce Young. Connor, did you hear a name on there that you don't like?
Bryce Young maybe, but I don't think that's necessarily his fault right now. I think it's more of a Carolina ownership problem.
I would agree. So I would take those 19 guys ahead of Levis. And again, that's what I think is fair. So on NBC Sports, on Pro Football Talk, Shereen Williams, and before you go, who's Shereen Williams? I don't know who that is. Before you do that, just know she is a Hall of Fame caliber writer. She had covered the Cowboys for the Morning News in Dallas for forever. She's been writing for NBC for the last however many years. She's a big-time award winner, and I know Shereen only because at the Combine, her and Floyd, very close. A lot of respect. Floyd had a lot of respect for Shereen Williams. So don't give me the, I don't know who that is. So they were talking on Pro Football Talk about which quarterback is most likely to lose their job early or first in the season, and you'll never guess where Shereen went.
All right, pop-up draft time on this topic. League-wide, quarterbacks with the most tenuous grip on their starting jobs entering the season. We know we've said several months before the season starts, but let's fast forward. We get to week one. Who is in the most precarious position? Shereen, you get the first selection.
I'm going to go with Will Levis. The Titans have had a good offseason, but it still comes down to the quarterback. They had several injuries. He had several injuries last season, couldn't stay on the field, right foot, quad injury, high ankle sprain. Same thing we were talking about Anthony Richardson, figuring out how to protect yourself and stay on the field. He went 3-6 as a starter. He has to learn a new system, all those things. Mason Rudolph looks serviceable. I think we know what Mason Rudolph is, and there's a reason that the Steelers didn't re-sign him. I get all that. But he played as good as he has played in his career last year. He went 3-0, just 3 touchdowns, but no interceptions. He's serviceable. You can win with Mason Rudolph with, I think, the team that they have built around Will Levis. So Will Levis is going to get a shot, but it's just like we were talking about with Daniel Jones. He's not going to get a ton of time. If they start out 1-3, 1-4, they're going to pull the plug and probably put Mason Rudolph in there.
Oh, no, Mason Rudolph. And let me say this. I don't agree with Shereen. But if that is what ends up happening, all hell's going to break loose around here. First and foremost, with the amount of sunshine pumping the Titans have done about Will Levis, specifically the coach. I haven't heard Rand talk about Will Levis the way that the coach does. But if that were to happen, if they were to go 4 games into the year, after Brian Callahan's telling SI, I don't know who I'd take over him. Vrabel never said that stuff about Mariota. Now, he said he thought Mariota could be good and all. He never said, I wouldn't take him Mariota. No. In fact, again, Vrabel's very reluctant when it comes to compliments, but Vrabel always felt like he was a little squirmish on Mariota. And so after all that said, if they were to go into week 5 and say, oh, man, we're getting our butts kicked, we got to change it up, let's put in Mason Rudolph. He better have the Ryan Tannehill, Joe Montana-like season when Tannehill got put in there for Mariota in 2019, or else it's going to be a tire fire. It's going to be an every week thing with all the money that had been spent on this year's team to put Mason Rudolph out there. There are going to be fans that are furious at the general manager for the fact that, again, I said this at the time when they signed Rudolph. I thought it was a terrible signing because I think Mason Rudolph is a true backup. And I don't think you need a true backup. I think you need better than that. Will Levis has been hurt each of the last 2 years. Will Levis is not a sure thing. And again, backup quarterbacks, because they don't practice anymore in the NFL, backup quarterbacks play, which is why I think Joe Flacco in Indianapolis is a really good decision. Why I think that Jameis Winston, who I can't stand, in Cleveland behind Deshaun, is a good decision. Deshaun is unreliable. So if Deshaun can't go, you turn it over to Jameis. Unlike last year when they had Dorian Thompson-Robinson, they played one game with him, said, oh, go get Flacco back in here. I mean, if you're put in the spot the Jets were last year, where, well, we got to put Zach Wilson in there and it's Mason Rudolph, you're going to lose. But if the Titans make the choice, it's one thing if Levis gets injured. If the Titans make the choice to take Levis out and put Mason Rudolph in, somebody's getting fired. Because the owner's already spent $150 million this offseason. And I'm not convinced the Titans are done spending money yet. Now, they're not going to have any big signings or big trades. But holy cow. Could you imagine spending $150 million starting the year 1-4, thinking you've got a young quarterback? Again, the owner told Mike Keith that the day that they fired Mike Vrabel. She said, well, fans, we've got a young quarterback to get excited about. To pull the plug on him and to put Mason Rudolph in there would be a disaster. And I remember the day of the draft. The draft probably wasn't my finest moment, but I remember the day of the draft when the midday show, I was leaving my home, going out to Twin Peaks for the draft, and I heard Caroline say on the midday show, you know, what are the odds Jared has a meltdown tonight on the draft show? And they said minus 650. And I said to myself, I'm in the car, I'm like, joke's on them, because the Titans are going to draft Joe Alt, and when they draft Joe Alt, I'm going to be the happiest guy in the world. And if they don't draft Joe Alt, they'll draft Malik Neighbors. And if they don't draft Malik Neighbors, they'll draft Roma Dunze or Brock Bowers, and I'll be happy. And then Joe Alt went to the Chargers. And then they drafted J.C. Latham, the one guy I didn't want them to draft. And I went nuts. And I felt bad because, again, as I was driving in, I was like, midday show, they'll see. I'm going to be happy with this pick. And then, of course, it was an all-time meltdown on draft night when they lost Alt and then they ended up drafting Latham and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of people think that a lot of my anger is contrived. It's not. It comes from the heart. I love the Titans. I want to see the Titans do well, and I am tired of the losing that they have had over the last 2 years. But I can promise you this. If Will Levis isn't the guy and they pull the plug on him and they stick Mason freaking Rudolph in there, I'm going to go nuts. Because I know Mason Rudolph's not the guy. And this is not about going 8-9 and trying to sneak into the 7th playoff spot like the Steelers did last year. This is about trying to build a football team that can compete. And you got Mason Rudolph in there. I don't see any scenario in which I'm happy that Mason Rudolph plays. Because the two scenarios in which he plays are that Levis is terrible, and I won't be happy about that, or Levis gets hurt, and then I will go nuts because I'll be sitting there saying, hey, if you had just spent a little bit more money on the backup quarterback, knowing that Levis has injury problems, and gone out and gotten a Joe Flacco, or called up Ryan Tannehill after the first 3 months of free agency and said, hey, what do you think? 1 year, $9 million. You know, if you had done something like that, you wouldn't be in the spot you're in where you're putting Mason Rudolph out there as your backup quarterback. And by the way, no disrespect to Shireen, again, I disagree. I think the Titans are going to ride this out with Levis. So I have at least 4 spots where I can see a team moving off of a quarterback before the Titans would move off of Levis. New York, where there's Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, I could see them very quickly moving off of Daniel Jones and going with Drew Lock. See, Drew Lock, that's a backup I could roll with. Aiden O'Connell right now is the starter with the Raiders. It would not surprise me if Aiden O'Connell, who is not very good, gets benched for Gardner Minshew, who is okay. Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh has Justin Fields behind him. I think both guys stink, but it would not surprise me if early on Russ isn't getting it done. They're not paying Russ any money, so they decide, well, let's give Fields a try. And then Geno Smith in Seattle, they have Sam Howell behind him. I think they're trying to develop Howell. to see, hey, maybe he becomes our starter down the road. Maybe we draft the guy down the road just in case. But if Geno's not the guy, new coach in there, it would not surprise me if they made that move. But the idea of moving, it'd be one thing if the Titans had a real backup quarterback, like a real quality backup quarterback, and then you could say, you know what, I could see him getting benched. I can't see Levis getting benched for Mason Rudolph. And if he does, I'm going to go nuts. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll continue with your phones on Levis, 615-737-1025. Plus, another little element of Levis that doesn't get discussed much, but probably is at least noteworthy, and that's his age. And what D-May said that means and how his age affects that. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Everyone asks me all the time around the draft, pre-draft, which of these kids is going to be the most successful? There's two answers. One, it's up to them. And two is show me the people that are around them and are helping to develop them. It's not necessarily about someone's physical potential all the time. So much of it is about, can you retain information? Can you process it? Can you use the information? Are you willing to study? and go through the intricate details of the game like Drew Brees was, like Peyton Manning was, like Phillip Rivers was, like some of the all-time great John Elway was, some of the all-time great quarterbacks were. You could be very physically talented. You could absolutely go to the wrong fit and have a coach instruct you to do things that are almost impossible to do.
Right.
You can't assume that what these young athletes are being told, that every coach is the same. Some coach may have one perspective, another coach may have another perspective.
That was Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's talking about, hey, man, why do these quarterbacks fail? Why is it maybe it's this? Why do these guys succeed? Why is it that? And again, it does take time. Going to the right coach, being coached up, being, held to hands, whether it's Jordan Love in Green Bay, whether it's Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, sitting on the bench, guys like that. We talked about Mahomes in the last hour. But the one thing that I think we need to keep in mind is that Will Levis is not your typical second-year quarterback. In fact, he's going to be 25 this year. When Marcus Mariota was 25, he had already been a starter for 3 years in the NFL. Marcus Mariota was on his third head coach when he was 25 years old at that point. Levis is going to be 25 this year. And so D. Mace was on the midday show, and they were talking about Levis's age and the fact that he's 25 years old. And D. Mace said, hey, the Titans are not going to be patient when it comes to Levis, given where they are and where he is.
We got to fast track this thing. You're not 21, 22, and you have 3 years before we have to pay you. You're 25 years old, and we need to find out if you can do it now. We can't wait. That's why this year, that's why they have surrounded him with the individuals they did. Veteran guys that have been through some stuff in this league, that have played some winning football, that understands. You marry him with a first-year guy, or in Will's case, a second-year guy, but it's really a first-year guy. You try to maximize as much as you can so you will know for sure heading into the next offseason, we don't need another quarterback, because it's not like he's 22, 23. He's been in the league 3 or 4 years by now. We're pushing up against that contract year where we may have to pay him a lot of money or not. You're 25 years old. Time ain't on your side. So we need to figure this out now.
So at first I thought, well, okay, he's 25, his second year in the league. He's not wrong. Think about this. Drew Brees is known as kind of a slow starter, right? Because he was drafted the first pick of the second round in 2002, and he wasn't very good at the beginning, and then they drafted Phillip Rivers, and then he had a good season, and then he got hurt, and then he goes off to New Orleans. But Drew Brees' age 25 season was the year that he made the Pro Bowl in San Diego. That was the year that they had drafted Rivers, and Rivers was going to eventually they had given up on Brees, but Brees was going to start because they didn't stick rookie quarterbacks out there like they do now. And Brees ended up making the Pro Bowl. That was the year he broke out. Tom Brady had already won a Super Bowl by the time he was 25. Jordan Love, his breakout season last year, he was 25. Mahomes had already won a Super Bowl and an MVP by the time he was 25. Peyton Manning had already been to the Pro Bowl twice, had already had a couple of playoff appearances when he turned 25. So while we can look at Levis and say he's a young quarterback, one thing I kept mentioning last year during the draft process when it came to Anthony Richardson, who was 21 years old at the time and will be 23 this season, is we can't compare Anthony Richardson at 21 years old at Florida to, say, C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, who was older at their schools, or in the case of Levis, the one that we really compared it to was Hendon Hooker, because Hendon Hooker was already 25 years old. Because Anthony Richardson was so young and had so much more room to grow. I do think Derek might be right that, hey, while it's not fair to look at a quarterback after X amount of snaps, 9 games last year, and then however many snaps he gets this year, and say, all right, either you're the guy or you're not, it is worth keeping in mind he's 25 years old. What is it? Isn't Drake May 21? So that is at least worth noting that, again, look, Rich Gannon didn't break out until he was 34 years old, but Rich is the exception. He's not the rule. Everybody else, for the most part, broke out by the time they were 25. Even Brett Favre had already been to 2 Pro Bowls at Green Bay by the time he turned 25. And he didn't even get drafted by Green Bay. So the age thing does matter. It's a factor here when it comes to Levis. 615-737-1025, and your phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com at 615-737-1025. One texter says, in response to the Shereen Williams take about maybe Levis will be the first guy benched, says, if they bench Will Levis, then we can go ahead and call the Titans front office Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Can't you already do that now? I mean, can't we already say that the Titans are too reactive? I mean, they gave John Robinson and Mike Vrabel contract extensions 2 years ago, and both guys are already gone. They fired Robinson 12 games into a new contract extension. That's crazy. It's like, well, Isaiah Wilson and Caleb Farley, they knew that when they gave him the extension that they had missed on Isaiah Wilson and Julio Jones. They knew that. And they still woke up one day, fired. They were in first place. Vrabel, they told Diana Rossini at Thanksgiving they weren't going to fire Vrabel. And, I mean, look, it's been sworn up and down to me, and I don't know what to believe. I know that, generally speaking, I do not believe the Titans. When it comes to the Titans, I generally speaking do not believe the Titans. And you should not believe the Titans either. But the sentiment is that at Thanksgiving, they did think Mike Vrabel was their coach for the long haul. But, things change. It's like they don't change that fast. So remember that when it comes to, they won't bench Levis. This team, they turn on everybody around here. One texter says there's too many Titan fans acting like the Titans just came off making the Super Bowl. You get grace when you win because you'll know that they'll pull it out. But when you've been terrible for 2 years, it's hard for me to agree with people that carry the Titans' water and the notion to, quote unquote, trust them. Well, we really don't have much of a choice, right? Because it's not like, okay, well, I don't trust the Titans. Well, I mean, they're still going to kick the ball off in September. But I do think that there is a significant amount of people, it's very surprising to me, a significant amount of people that this time of the year just believe everything the Titans do is right. And they ignore every red flag. And I said this, I remember when I went on with Corey Curtis on Labor Day Sunday on that Sports Extra of 2020. And I went on with Corey Curtis the day they signed Jadeveon Clowney on the news. Didn't even have a show that day. And I said I wouldn't have done it. Now, this was when I believed the salary cap was real. So, different times. Maybe I'll change my tune based upon what I think of the cap. But I said I wouldn't have done it. And people were furious. I mean, livid. With the fact, Jared, you're a hater. You didn't know he had some graphs that told me he was as good as Joey Bosa. Come on now. I said, don't do it with Julio. Don't do it. You guys got so mad at me. I said, look, okay, fine. If you're going to do the Julio thing, then either give them a bad pick and take the money or give them a decent pick, but they have to keep the money. And even then, I'm against it. And the Titans gave him a good pick and took the money. And I said, no. And you guys, oh, no, Jerry, this will be the greatest show on turf. I mean, AJ, Derek, Julio, Ferkser, Reynolds. Who's going to stop that? I said, oh, no. And so the amount of people that just this time of the year see the Titans make a move and think everything they do is great drives me insane. But it's never going to change because the amount of people out there that want affirmation, I believe the majority of the people that listen to this program, if you've looked at our ratings lately, it's a lot of people. I believe that the majority of the people that listen to this program are smart, are rational, and reasonable. Mix those two words up. I think they are smart, rational, and reasonable. And they know, like, hey, man, we're taking a huge risk on L'Jarius Sneed's knees here. We're taking a huge risk. You know, firing Vrabel, a guy that everybody thinks is a good coach, bringing in Callahan, we'll see. But then there's a minority of people, probably like 30%, that just, how dare you, Jared, question the fact that T'Vondre Sweat is 40 pounds overweight, and that there were maturity questions, and that people around the NFL are all saying, I don't know if I'd have made that pick, and the fact that he got a DWI 2 weeks for the, how dare you question the Titans? And it's like, really? Really? 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. PK! And I'm not used to saying this, but I'm going to say this. Paul Kaharski, with maybe the rational take of the day. I can't believe I'm saying it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
Got receivers, protection, everything. How do you like what the organization has done?
I love it. I mean, for one, it means that they're not afraid to make those investments and they want to go win, which is awesome to see. And we know that we had the guys to make it work, but adding more guys certainly doesn't hurt, and it creates more competition and more options. And I'm just excited to work with obviously the rookies who will be here today, and then when TB gets here to get the whole kind of group together. It's going to be awesome.
That was Will Levis a couple weeks ago being like, man, I love the moves we made because we're going to go out there to win. And boy, Titan fans are excited. I've seen Titan fans, they've either texted into the text line or they tweeted me and they've said things like, Jared, this is the best offseason we've ever had. And I'm like, so? And so I was listening to Robbie and Rexler this morning. PK was in studio with them. And I don't often agree with Paul Kaharski, but every now and then Kaharski hits the nail on the head. And this was this morning when Kaharski, who has been rather positive lately, Titans have made, PK said, hold on, wait a minute. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
They emphasize collaboration. It's clearly been collaborative. I think it's worked the way they wanted it to so far. But you can't mark it down in pen as to how it's gone in May. The team that wins free agency, lots of years the Titans have sat back and said, that team over there that won free agency isn't going to look so good in September. So you can't now in May.
Ding, ding. Free agency doesn't always win during the season. And I'm not going to lie, the Titans have gotten good players. Lloyd Cushenberry is a good player. Tyler Boyd is a fit for what they're looking to do. Calvin Ridley runs down the field. What's funny is on my free agent board notes, I wrote on Boyd, I'm like, the one thing I'm skeptical about with Boyd is that he doesn't run down the field. On Ridley, what I was skeptical about were the absences in Atlanta and, that gambling year. And if Nick Holtz was in Jacksonville last year, he knows Ridley. So if he gives me the thumbs up, I think I can let that go. And that Ridley drops the ball a little bit. And maybe some of that was just rust. So Ridley's a guy who runs down the field. I like that. Boyd's a guy who doesn't run down the field, but he's a slot guy. And I think so I just didn't want Boyd to be the one free agent receiver, but as the second, it's great. Cushenberry is exactly what they needed at that spot. Now, I'm a little concerned about the inside backer, concerned about the safety position. I wish they'd done something at tight end, so on and so forth. But they did get decent players. And if L'Jarius Sneed's knees are okay, then that's a great move. A great move. But I'm not ready to say it is because we don't know about his knees. Here's my problem with celebrating the Titans as the off-season team of the year. To me, it's threefold. Number one, it's the amount of people who are not open to the idea that these potential issues could be problems. Now, I talked about when people got mad at me about Clowney. People got mad at me about Julio. Those were potential problems. There is a chance when you acquire Julio Jones the way they did that Julio's hamstring injury is behind him and Julio plays like the Julio Jones he was in Atlanta, and you really do have Ryan Tannehill, A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, and the original Julio Jones. Not likely because he's 31 years old, but it's possible. But the amount of people who aren't even open to the idea that L'Jarius Sneed's knees could be a problem, that Tavondre Sweat's weight could be a problem, that J.C. Latham's transition from right tackle to left tackle could be a problem, that Calvin Ridley dropped the football or his missed time could be an issue. That, I can't say off-season champions because those little dings exist. Like, Sneed is a great player when healthy. But is he healthy? The second reason why I can't get behind the off-season champions is because the idea of losing Derrick Henry and Danico Autry never comes into the equation. It's like you guys talk about all the guys the Titans have spent money on, how much better they are. But we never talk about, to me that's like a gross number, right? Like, how much money did you make? Well, we made $18,000. Well, how much did you spend? $9,000. Okay, well, you made $9. Right? You netted $9. Your gross was $18. Your gross was all the guys you went out and added. Pollard and Cushenberry and Latham and Sweat and Sneed and Murray and Awuzie and all those guys. You do lose Derrick Henry and Danico Autry. We never talk about, hey, there's a lot of production between those two guys that you have to replace. Because I'm going to say this about Derrick Henry and Danico Autry. Those are some bad boys now. And those were dependable players. I know Derrick Henry doesn't catch the ball out of the backfield. You all know Derrick Henry's a good player. And you guys still know Derrick Henry's got a little bit of juice. Not the same Derrick, but he's got juice now. I hate that he's on the Ravens because I don't like the Ravens, but I also hate it because I think that he's not really what the Ravens need. But Derrick's going to have a good year this year. And then the third reason why I can't get behind the off-season champions is because the Titans still don't have a right tackle. And I will continue to kvetch about this every single day because it is absurd to me that they don't have a right tackle. And then people say, well, I can't fill every hole in a year. It's right tackle. It's a real position. Not one of these fake positions. It's a real position. It's not inside backer where you can fudge it. It's not tight end where Chig's out there. By the way, in the SI article, they did like a film breakdown with where Albert Breer sat with Levis and Callahan, and they watched the Atlanta tape. Of course, the Atlanta tape. They watched the Atlanta tape. And there were a couple throws. They were like, now this was a really good throw, but it was a bad decision, but the ball was dropped by Treylon Burks. This was a really good decision. This was one, but the ball was dropped by Treylon Burks. This was a really good, but this was not a great throw, but it was a good decision. And his feet were with it, but it was dropped by Chig. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about how much Chig and Burks dropped the ball. And so at tight end, like, I'm still cautious. Let's go to Dre, who's up next and has been waiting on the program. Thank you for calling. What's up, Dre?
What's going on, Jerry? Hey, man, what was that Vrabel called you? I think it was Gurley, man.
No, Vrabel didn't call me anything. Vrabel said I needed to think like a dude. Think like a man. Think like an athlete.
Yeah, and guess what? That's where the Gurley man comes. Because you're coming off like a Gurley man. Now, why is all of this whining and crying about this? Oh, you just trying
What are you mad about? What are you mad about?
I think that everything that we've done up to this point, man, is a swing in the right direction. Everything. They address everything.
Did they? Who's playing right tackle?
Versus MPF.
Right. So they've addressed everything, and they put a guy who last year was suspended for half the season when he played was terrible, and then after being terrible got hurt because he couldn't keep up with TJ Watt.
Come on, dude. Come on, man.
Do you think that Nicholas Petit-Frere is a starting caliber right tackle in the NFL?
I do. Yes,
of course
I definitely do.
Okay, how do they address inside backer?
Inside backer?
Yes.
What do you mean inside backer?
Well, you said they've addressed everything. The inside linebacker position. They lost
the kid that we drafted.
So you're going to take the 106th pick in the draft, and you're going to say, hey, you're going to play the snaps that Azeez Al-Shaair played last year.
No, actually, Murray is the guy for that.
Well, he's not a good inside backer at that. That's not what he does.
No, let's just say he didn't fit in the system that he was in, Jared. Come on, man. He didn't fit in that system out in San Diego.
So we're supposed to believe he's going to fit in this system.
You don't think random don't know what they're looking at? That they didn't put the right people in place? I just think you're going real hard at it, man. I think that you can find a better spin to kind of get the people engaged instead of kind of working us up like everything that they Sneed, knees, and all of this. Sneed is elite, dude. He's a top 3 cornerback, and you got something to say about him.
So why did you get him for a 3rd-round pick in next year's draft?
Why did you? Oh my! Come on.
Why, Dre? Why did you get him for a 3rd-round pick in next year's draft?
Pay him. They
no.
couldn't afford to pay him.
And nobody else in the league wanted to pay him.
Did nobody?
It was the knees, Dre. Dre, I love you. Thank you for your call. But again, Dre's telling me that everything's going to be fine. I'm sitting here telling you, I'm like, hey, this could work. It could. There's a chance it could work. There's a chance that you could fudge it at tight end with Chig. I'm not a huge fan, but there's a chance you could do it. But he's sitting here saying, like, L'Jarius Sneed is the best. And I'm like, okay, so if he's the best, why did you get him for a third-round pick in next year's draft?
Too much optimism, in my opinion.
It's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. Call a spade a spade. L'Jarius Sneed is an injury risk. That's why L'Jarius Sneed hasn't been out at OTAs, because he's inside rehabbing his knees because he's got bad knees. Now, if L'Jarius Sneed can get through this and he can play 17 times this year, he doesn't have to practice a single day. If he can play the way that he played at Kansas City, but nobody else in the league was willing to take that risk. Not one other team. Minnesota had a better offer on the table, and when they learned more about Sneed's knees, they reportedly pulled the offer off the table. That's it. Again, there's a reason why he was on the discount rack. Let's just admit it for what it is. There's a chance this isn't a problem. And I'll give Rand Carthon and company credit that they didn't do what John Robinson did on Julio Jones, which was trade a good pick and the money. They traded a so-so pick and the money on Sneed. But this idea that like, oh, Jared, I can't believe you would say Kenneth Murray, even though he was awful with the Chargers. He just didn't fit their system. He's going to be a star here. Come on. Like, that's the stuff I can't deal with. That's that culture of toxic positivity. Head up ass syndrome. I can't do it. 615-737-1025. More of your phone. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
that's kind of what I'm getting at with Carthon. You know, I think it's premature to give him a chef's hat and say, man, this guy can cook. You know, and I just think it's silly. We got caught up in J-Rob we trust, only to see it go down in flames. So why must it be, here I'll be gray, Joe, why must it be it's either great or it sucks? Why can't we just say it looks good right now? Let's see how it goes for a while, and then we'll determine if he gets a sheriff's badge or not.
There you go. That was PK, and I'm on PK's side right there again saying, hey, like as far as this offseason is concerned, maybe they cooked. But, like, let's see, right? Let's see if L'Jarius Sneed can get on the field. Let's see if T'Vondre Sweat can get in shape. Let's see if J.C. Latham can play left tackle. Skyler says, Sneed is a dog, but his knees are sketchy. If the Titans get 2 elite years of play from Sneed with the contract, will it be worth it? I think he's got like $50 million guaranteed. I believe, Skyler, it's 55 that's guaranteed as far as L'Jarius Sneed is concerned. He says, but the knees do make it hard for me to believe that he will last past 30 years old. Here's the deal on L'Jarius Sneed's knees. I could see this being a problem tomorrow, and I could see this being something that is never an issue. I mean, it was not an issue in Kansas City. Yeah, he missed some practices, but that doesn't matter. Like the practices, and if you can play, you can play. And he played well. But at the same time, Kansas City was reluctant to give him a contract because of the knees. Carrington Harrison, who does afternoon drive in Kansas City and works with me at Sirius, Carrington said on his show in Kansas City, he said that he heard Sneed's knees are bad. And that he said on his show, you might say, oh, it's not that bad. And Carrington said, oh, no, it's that bad. Take the money. So when somebody just calls in and is like, oh, yeah, no, the reason why Sneed was traded for a third-round pick next year is simply because they didn't want to pay him. That's not true. And the knees could be an issue. I think the Titans did it because they told themselves basically the same thing John Robinson told himself, which was, look, the Caleb Farley back might be bad, but if it's not, and if Farley's the dude, and if we make this move, we'll look like geniuses getting a shutdown corner with the 21st pick. And I think the Titans told themselves, hey, if we take the $55 million risk, which again is probably equal to a first-round pick because that money is real, Amy is not going to give you another $55 million to make up for the $55 million you blow. If we take the $55 million risk, there's a chance we get the best corner in the NFL. Now, I think it is more likely that Sneed performs than it is that Farley did, but we also know how the Farley story ends. But I think it's kind of the same theoretical list. One texter says, we have several grown men, genuine NFL professional football players that can play right tackle. When you start yelling, we don't have a right tackle, you sound completely ignorant. We have a right tackle, Jared, and depth, and you just don't like them. Okay, here's what you have at right tackle. Nicholas Petit-Frere, and I do believe I have his, no, that's Justin Simmons. Let me pull up Nicholas Petit-Frere's Pro Football Focus numbers, because last season they were horrendous. I mean, truly downright horrendous. And I know he didn't play much, but that doesn't make up for it. His grade last season was 35.5. That's awful. So that's the leader in the clubhouse to be your right tackle. His grade the year before that, his rookie year in the NFL, his grade the year before that was in the 50s. He stunk. And I said, I gave him the benefit of the doubt last year when I said, well, maybe he stunk because he's a rookie and it's hard for rookies to play in the NFL. And so now that he's got his rookie year behind him, you know, they don't practice anymore. So rookies are kind of learning on the fly on the offensive line. So now that he's got that behind him, maybe he'll do better. He stunk. That's your first option. The second option is Jalen Duncan. Jalen Duncan might have been worse last year than Nicholas Petit-Frere. And that's saying something because, again, Nicholas Petit-Frere had a grade in the 30s. Jalen Duncan's grade last year, his first year in the NFL, was atrocious. I mean, again, not that Pro Football Focus is everything, but I do kind of agree with where Pro Football Focus has these guys. You know, Jalen Duncan was awful last year. I believe Jalen Duncan allowed the most sacks in the NFL, tied with Andre Dillard, who played more than him. Those are your top two options. Your third option, I think, should be your first option, Dylan Radins, and I think that's who's going to be playing there. Dylan Radins is practicing at guard. Your other options are Leroy Watson, who has never started an NFL game, and John Ojukwu, an undrafted free agent who played a handful of snaps last year. That's awful. And yet, every time I bring this up, every time I get worked up about it, I get somebody in here who tells me that, oh no, Jared, Nicholas Petit-Frere, I know he had a 30 grade last year. I know he allowed, I think it was like 11 pressures on 66 pass snaps last year. 11 pressures on 66 passes. That is terrible. I know, but it doesn't count. Bill Callahan will fix it. And I'm like, okay. Well, until he does that, in my opinion, you don't have a right tackle. Until your right tackles prove that they can play right tackle, and they haven't done that yet, they're not right tackles. They're Scarbinis. And that's not a Scarbini position. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. So, I try not to read too much into social media, but social media is the way that the players communicate nowadays. And now I'm putting 1 and 1 together, and it is equaling 2. That's not good. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Titans had their second open OTA of the offseason. TD says not spotted at OTAs today. DeAndre Hopkins, Colton Dowell, Nick Westbrook-Akine, L'Jarius Sneed, Kenneth Murray, Harold Landry, Jalen Duncan, Nicholas Petit-Frere, Tavondre Sweat, TK McClendon, and Jeffrey Simmons. Now, the teams, the coaches, everybody, they will tell you it's voluntary. So you don't need to be there. It's voluntary. And so anytime we talk about, well, Johnny Joe is not at OTAs, they'll say, well, it's voluntary, Jared. And I understand why the teams have to say it. It's the only thing that the players get constantly in the collective bargaining agreement is time off during the offseason, so the coaches and teams cannot shame them. But I don't work for the Titans. So I live in the real world. And the real world, the unwritten rule is if you just got paid, you go to OTAs. If you're the quarterback, you go to OTAs, unless you've got a contract problem that is immediate. Not something down the road, but immediate like Lamar Jackson and his deal last year. If not, you go to OTAs. Because the team relies on you. You got to get to know everybody. Quarterback goes to OTAs. If you're a young player who is fighting for a spot, you go to OTAs. Like if you're Jack Gibbons and you think you've got a shot to be the inside backer of this team, you go to OTAs. If you're Harold Landry, you don't need to go to OTAs. Doesn't matter. You didn't just get paid. Harold Landry doesn't need to learn. Harold's fine. But other guys need to be there. So DeAndre Hopkins does not qualify as somebody who has to go to OTAs. DeAndre Hopkins did not just get paid. And DeAndre Hopkins is not the quarterback. But DeAndre Hopkins was there last week, and he wasn't there today. And somebody texted in the text line yesterday, and they said, Jared, should we be concerned that DeAndre Hopkins has removed all photos, references, whatever it may be to the Titans? Should we be concerned on Instagram? Now, I don't follow DeAndre on Instagram. And I'm sure that he'll probably call me a racist for the third time in my life because we're having this discussion. But I did pull up his Instagram. And I was just kind of searching through it. And I see DeAndre going to the country concert, DeAndre on the golf course, DeAndre at a crawfish boil, DeAndre hanging out, DeAndre. Okay, here's DeAndre on the football field in an Arizona Cardinals jersey taken December 1, 2021. I don't know what was on there before. Maybe some of you do. But there is no mention of the Titans on DeAndre Hopkins' Instagram. It would be a leap for me to say DeAndre Hopkins wasn't an OTA. He must want a new contract. Because Harold Landry wasn't there, and I don't think he wants a new contract. Jeffrey Simmons wasn't there, and I don't think he wants a new contract. But again, trying to put all the nuggets together, try to connect the dots here. DeAndre, and I have to take you at your word because I didn't follow DeAndre before this, but DeAndre removes any kind of acknowledgement of the Titans off of his Instagram. I don't know if he had it on there or if he didn't. But if he did, and DeAndre's a pretty big Instagrammer, so I kind of assume that he did. If DeAndre did, he's taken it off. That is always the first sign of somebody who is unhappy with their team. It is kind of childish. But again, in today's collective bargaining agreement, there is not a lot of recourse that a player under contract has in order to show his disappointment or want for a new contract. I mean, it's reality. These guys don't have a lot they can do. You can't hold out anymore. If DeAndre holds out, it's like $50,000 a day. He can't hold out anymore. So you miss the voluntary stuff and you take the team off your Instagram. Now, you're still following the Titans, so maybe that's a good sign. But again, DeAndre Hopkins, not at OTAs. DeAndre Hopkins, no reference to the Titans on Instagram. And the reality is, DeAndre Hopkins probably should be upset about his contract. And upset may not be the right word. Leveraging for a new deal is probably the right phrase here. Because I've thought on several occasions, and even brought this up yesterday on the program, when I talked about how last year they made a mistake before the season of not extending Danico Autry. Because in my opinion, Danico Autry had proven that he was reliable enough, even at his older age, reliable enough and impactful enough that, hey, let's get this deal done before he gets out in free agency, because if he gets out in free agency, the price might be too high. And now Danico is a Texan. And I said, I'm thinking that with DeAndre Hopkins. That is, if he and Levis are building a rapport, DeAndre's game has never been built on speed. You know, that's what happens. You take a speed guy and they get older. Now they're slow. Now they're not good anymore. You take a skill guy like Jerry Rice and he gets older. He ages gracefully because his game's not built on the diminishing speed. DeAndre's game is not built on speed. But DeAndre should want a new contract. Nico Collins just signed a new contract. He had one good season. And I still think he might be their third best receiver behind Diggs and Dell. And he just signed a new contract for $24 million a year. DeAndre makes 14. DeAndre makes 14. 24th in salary, average per year amongst NFL wide receivers. 24th, tied with Gabriel Davis and Darnell Mooney. In DeAndre's, when he was in Arizona, he averaged $19.2 million a year. He's making 14. He had an 1,000-yard season last year. DeAndre Hopkins, even at his age, if he was a March 14th free agent, is probably worth $20 million a year. And a lot of that is probably because the receiver market has exploded into the 30s. And there's going to be a lot of guys that sign here that are going to be well into the 30s. Jefferson is going to sign. Chase is going to sign. And that's going to push that number up, 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 up. And so I wonder if DeAndre is, maybe had some just preliminary talks with the Titans about, hey, would we like to get a new deal done and guarantee some money for next year, even though he's not under contract next year. And again, I'm just connecting the dots here. Within the last week, somebody yesterday texted into the text line and said, should we be worried that DeAndre pulled all of the Titan stuff off of Instagram? I went to his Instagram. There's no Titan stuff there. Now, he is still following the Titans, but there was no Titan stuff there. He was not at OTAs today. He was there a couple weeks ago, last week, but he wasn't there today. Could it be that he's frustrated that the Titans, like Danico, oh, no, we'll wait, we'll see, could that be the case? And again, the third dot here that I'm connecting is I think DeAndre Hopkins should want a new contract for next season and an increase in pay for this season. I absolutely think he has earned it. I think he's more than a $14 million player. I thought it was a genius move the way they signed him to that 2-year contract, because it's like, well, if he's good, then you have him under contract for next year, and he can't just all of a sudden walk away, use you for a 1-year prove-it deal, and then go get $25 million in the market. But at the same time, he's not a $14 million player. He's more than a $14 million player. He's tied with Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney, 24th in receiver pay. Darnell Mooney sucks. And Gabe Davis is a one-trick pony. I mean, he deserves more money. And I do think if you're the Titans, you need to have the discussion internally about, do we want to extend DeAndre Hopkins? Because even though Hopkins is older and Ridley's older and Boyd's older, and that if they get this thing going with Levis, he's going to have to usher in a new era of wide receivers, similar to what Josh Allen is having to do right now in Buffalo. Well, wouldn't it be good to have continuity for Levis at least going into the next season? And I think DeAndre has shown us that he'll age gracefully. So, again, I don't know. Maybe he was just going to the park this week. Again, it's voluntary. But connecting the dots, the Instagram thing, that is a statement nowadays. And DeAndre does deserve a new deal. 615-737-1025. Add that to the list, 615-737-1025. We'll touch that. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
How excited I get, sorry, about the additions at the wide receiver position, and how do you think maybe having two other top quality guys like that might benefit you?
I think this is one of the best wide receiver groups I've had a chance to play with on paper. So obviously, I can come up here and say a bunch, but we haven't played a game yet. So we'll see how it goes once we hit the field.
What's that going to take to turn success on paper into success on Sunday?
I just take it day by day. Tyler Boyd's been in his program for a while. Just taking it day by day. A lot of us are still learning. How things go. So just coming out practicing.
That was DeAndre Hopkins when he was at practice last week. DeAndre not at practice this week. Again, connecting the three dots here. One, DeAndre's underpaid. $14 million. That's, again, tied with Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney. I mean, that's bad. And then wasn't at OTAs today. And then somebody texted and said DeAndre took down his Titan stuff on Instagram. Cole in Nashville. Now, this is important information. Cole in Nashville says DeAndre didn't have photos on his Instagram all last season. He posted maybe one time, and it was a throwback picture. And his one or two pictures have been taken down for almost 3 months. He has 2 photos of the Titans in his Instagram currently. So there are pictures where you have to slide through them, to get to like the picture of him pulling the guy's arm as he makes that great catch that Louis Riddick complained about in Miami. But if he had pics and he took them down, that's not a good sign. Because that's the communication for today. That is the way these people show their unhappiness. Dwight says, give Hopkins $20 million right now. That comes from Dwight in Kentucky. So here's what I would do. Because I do think Hopkins is underpaid, and I do think I would want to sign Hopkins to an extension so that I don't get Danico Autry, which is Hopkins has another good season, goes into free agency. I want to bring him back because the relationship with Levis is good, and all of a sudden, here comes Jacksonville, and they pay more money than me, and he's there. Indy. Just like Danico went to Houston. Here's the deal I would give him. A 1-year extension. Again, he's on year 2 of a 2-year deal. A 1-year extension with an extra $5 million this year, which would take him up to 19, and $4 million guaranteed next year and $16 million for next season. So he'd be making 19 this year, 16 next year, and that would essentially be a 2-year, $21 million contract, or 2 years, $21 million in extra dollars that I would be giving him, and $9 million extra that I'd be guaranteeing him. I mean, I'm not saying all of a sudden that, DeAndre's underpaid, so go give DeAndre $25 million. That's the reason that you signed DeAndre to the contract you did last year, and it was because nobody else wanted him. But I do think, if you think it's going to go as well as they think it's going to go, it would only make sense to extend DeAndre. And the other reason it would make sense to extend DeAndre is because they didn't draft a receiver this year. I don't care about the guy they took in the second. I'm talking about, a high-end young receiver. And at some point they're going to have to draft that. And they keep putting it off. Like, even though they drafted Burks, that was to replace A.J. Brown. But the Titans have needed a young impact receiver ever since Corey Davis left. They need one of those guys, especially now, to grow with Levis. And don't tell me it's going to be Burks. He's had 2 years in the NFL, and he hadn't done anything. So I can't count on that. Texter said, how much money did DeAndre Hopkins make last year with incentives? It was way more than 14. So, according to this, DeAndre Hopkins earned last year, this is overthecap.com, DeAndre Hopkins earned $14 million last year. Because he signed a deal for $13 million, which 10.9 was guaranteed. Again, how accurate is that? I don't know. But we're talking about Hopkins here, and Hopkins made $14 million last year. I wonder if the $1 million, if it was 13 and the incentives were remember Tannehill threw a ball that was like a hospital ball basically for Hopkins? Like, it was a very dangerous pass, And after the game, Tannehill was like, yeah, I was trying to get his incentives. I don't care. I won't be here next year. And I do wonder if that was the $1 million that got Hopkins to 14. So I think you're wrong, Texter, when you say it was way more than 14, because, again, overthecap.com says that he earned $14 million this past year, and his contract for this year in actual cash is, let's see, boy, it's a lot of bonuses and everything else. $14 million. Oh, he's got a $250,000 workout bonus, and he's got a $1 million per game bonus. Joel says we should break out the DeAndre Watch sounder from last year. Boy, I tell you, DeAndre Watch was fun last year. I thoroughly enjoyed DeAndre Watch. Zach in Nashville says that DeAndre was at OTAs yesterday. So where was DeAndre? Where was DeAndre today? And I know people will say, well, it's voluntary. And it is for a guy like DeAndre. He hasn't signed a new contract. And thus, if you get paid, you have to be there. It's as simple as that. Now, again, I understand excused absences, son's graduation, things like that. I get it, fine. But to me, the rule is if you have signed a big contract, you have to be there. Lloyd Cushenberry has to be at OTAs. He signed a big contract in the offseason. He has no reason to be unhappy. They're paying him to be a leader. He has to be at OTAs. Calvin Ridley has to be at OTAs. They paid him a boatload of money. He's got no reason to be upset. You got to be at OTAs. Last year, Christian Fulton wasn't at OTAs, and I had a problem with that. But, again, if you're a guy who's trying for a job, Nicholas Petit-Frere and Jalen Duncan haven't been on the field, reportedly, for the 2 open OTAs they've had. Boy, really doing a lot to win that right tackle job, huh? Remember what Bill Parcells used to say, can't make the club in the tub. So that is at least a little bit of a concern for me as far as, hey, the guys that aren't there. But for Hopkins, he doesn't have to be there. I'm just, again, connecting dots here saying that I think DeAndre Hopkins needs a contract. 615-737-1025. Jason Fitz joins us next. So Brian Callahan intimates, because I wouldn't say that he said he would take Will Levis over Caleb Williams, but he made it sound like he would take Will Levis over Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, with his comments to Sports Illustrated yesterday. Is that too over the top? Fitz joins us next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. So the big story today, Brian Callahan. And I don't know how to take Brian Callahan at this point. I'm still learning. You know, it's not like Vrabel, who I had covered for 6 years or however long it was, and I knew how to speak Vrabelese. Brian Callahan says to Albert Breer at Sports Illustrated that he told Rand Carthon after evaluating Will Levis this year, you know, tell the scouts, still do their due diligence and put grades on guys and all that. I had the conversation with Rand. Part of it was like, if Will's coming out in this draft class, I don't know that I feel like anybody is better than him at this point. Breer writes, it may sound like a strong statement to make given the type of class that was coming. Is he really better than Caleb Williams, Jada Daniels, Drake May? Jason Fitz joins us on the program now, Yahoo Sports, Fox Sports Radio. So, Fitz, let's start there. Do you think Brian Callahan, who has said nothing but good things since he started working with Will Levis, do you think Brian Callahan, he didn't say that on accident to Albert Breer, do you think he really believes that? Do you think there's any truth to that, or do you think this is just pure sunshine pumping, given that most of the narrative outside of Nashville is very negative when it comes to Levis?
Look, I think he has to believe it to a certain extent because he took the job, right? And when you take the job as a first-time head coach, you got to know your quarterback situation coming into the room. You can't tell me that it wasn't part of the interview process of what do you think of Will Levis. I mean, the organization and the team both had to be comfortable. And the other side of it is, look at where they picked in the draft. If they really fell in love with anybody not named Caleb Williams, they could have tried aggressively to move up. Have we heard a single report from anybody plugged in that they tried to move up? Make sure you were comfortable doing that, especially new regime. You could excuse, hey, I didn't draft this guy. I want my own quarterback, and everybody could have gotten on board with it. So, you know, I see where Callahan could have had wiggle room if he didn't love it. I don't think he takes the job if he doesn't think Will can be capable. This makes a lot of sense to me. Not everybody agrees, but this makes sense to me when you stack the logic, man.
So I do wonder this, though, which is when it comes to Callahan, you know this as well as I do. Coaches and GMs usually get one crack at a quarterback. And if you swing and miss on it, the chance that you get another quarterback, it's usually not very high. You know, right now, Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles in Chicago are living simply because, well, we didn't draft Justin Fields. So they get the crack at Caleb Williams. Brian Callahan has plausible deniability if Levis doesn't work out. Because he can say he didn't draft him. He didn't scout him. Rand Carthon can't say that, but he can. I feel like Fitz, the effusive praise that Brian Callahan has lavished upon Will Levis, even if he doesn't believe it, is enough for me to think, okay, you're now taking ownership of Levis. You do not have the plausible deniability, if it doesn't work, that I didn't pick him. Is that fair?
That's tough. I mean, I hear where you're coming from, and you can't have it both ways. You can't say the quarterback's not the problem and then turn around and say the quarterback is the problem. I hear where you're coming from, but do you think that would really change it? I mean, yes, what you're saying makes sense, but ultimately, if anybody's going to live on the chopping block for the Will Levis pick at some point, it would be Rand, because Rand was the guy that picked him. I mean, that's what you're saying makes sense. Would the logic ever be applied? I don't think so. I think, to that point, Brian Callahan this is the one thing that becomes difficult about some of these cycling and hires. The way we do it is like,
bingo.
You can look at it, and, you can look at the cycling hire and say, okay, well, fine. At this point, I didn't hire him, and that's the GM's fault. And then the GM gets fired, but the coach stays, and you end up with this ever revolving door.
Well, so I think bad teams fits. I think the Bears are an example of this. I think the Jets are an example of this. Bad teams play the musical blame game. I think the Titans are an example of this, which is the coach, the quarterback, the GM. Somebody every year, if things don't go well, gets blamed. For the Titans, you were here when they kind of started the John Robinson era, and it was Robinson, Mularkey, and Mariota. And you remember, people thought Mariota was a franchise quarterback. And so, whose fault was it first? Mike Mularkey. So he gets fired. Then Vrabel comes in. Mariota regresses, but they can't blame Vrabel because Vrabel's the new guy, so Mariota gets the blame. Then it was Robinson's fault. And then last year it was Vrabel's fault. Bad franchises do that, where they play musical blame. And so I look at the quarterback, and I look at the odd scenario the Titans are in, and I really believe that Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon maybe could throw Levis under the bus if things don't go well. And I want to lump them all together and say, all right, you three are together. If it doesn't work, all three of you are out. Not the traditional musical blame, because I believe when you do that, you're just constantly going to be in the same cycle, and you're never going to be on the same page with the GM hiring the coach and the quarterback at the same time.
Well, and to add to your point, you're always delaying the inevitable. Like, at some point, to me, what successful organizations have is clear communication about who does what, and they're all on the same page. That doesn't mean they have to agree with everything, but it does mean that they have to agree on the process, and they have to agree on the way it all goes down. And, to your point also, when you start talking about the blame game, it's because so many people, when they get to any of this level, are not really looking for wins and losses. They're looking to protect their contracts. They want to continue to work, So just like players at times, there are certain groups of players that don't necessarily care as much about the wins and losses. They care about making sure they continue to feed their family. I believe there are plenty of front office and coaches that are the same. Like, yes, we want to win, but when it goes bad, it immediately has to be blamed on someone else. You're not wrong about any of that. But when you think about the really well-run organizations, it's because I think this is what you have to have. You have to have a very clear power structure where everybody knows exactly who does what, where there's a true accountability to what was done and why it was done. And this is exactly part of the reason why, because if you end up with, well, that's sort of his fault, we weren't on the same page about this, and I didn't want that guy picked, and you start hearing that revisionist history from coaches about the draft all the time, that to me is a signal that if that gets leaked out, that people are protecting themselves and trying to blame somebody else. That never works out long-term for an organization. You're not wrong.
Jason Fitz is with us on the program, Yahoo Sports, Fox Sports Radio. Fitz, on the other side of the Levis discussion, Bill Barnwell put out yesterday, AFC team superlatives, and for the Titans, it was the fan base that is most likely to be excited based on, or I think it's the fan base most likely to talk themselves into a quarterback based on preseason snaps. Shereen Williams, who I have a lot of respect for at NBC, she said she thinks the quarterback most likely to get benched first is Will Levis. Fitz, I am shocked by the national narrative surrounding Will Levis that is, he sucks and there is no chance that he could be successful, when I'm not convinced that outside of C.J. Stroud, he had a rookie season that most people would say was not indicative of that of a young rookie quarterback.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. And I think anybody that's giving you any grade on what to expect this year from the team other than incomplete is at some point just trying to fill out words on a paper. Because honestly, like, if you want to stack the variables, what we know versus what we don't, we genuinely have no idea what Bill Callahan's going to look like as a head coach. We have no idea. Then we have no idea what Will Levis is going to look like in this offense. Nobody has any idea. We have no idea what the development will look like when you're asking a quarterback now to learn a second playbook in this amount of time. How much are they able to translate to? We have no idea. So much of this position that we talk about all the time is about your ability to process and learn information quickly. What systems are they putting in place to make sure that he can do that? We have no idea. I think the reason people presume that the Titans are going to be bad is because there's just nothing there to give benefit of the doubt that they'll be good. We don't live in a society that wants to presume everything's going to work out. I think if you look at this and say, look at the progression that we saw, and look at the immediate success that we saw from Joe Burrow, look at the way that offense was run, look at the way the Titans have built the team this year in the offseason, I think they've had a pretty good year. Am I coming here going gangbusters and doing cartwheels for the Titans today? No. Do I think that this could turn out to be a pleasant surprise? Yeah, I think it's equally fair. If we're going to sit here and say, well, Will Levis sucks, it's equally fair to say, yeah, but what if he doesn't? Because we don't know. Like, we have no idea yet.
So where I sit, I am 50-50 on Levis. I could see this going either way. I could see Dan Marino. I could see Blake Bortles. He's got the potential, but he hasn't proven that he can be that or not. Fitz, again, locally, after all the moves the Titans made, the fans are euphoric. They think that with L'Jarius Sneed and Lloyd Cushenberry and Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd and Chidobe Awuzie, and that this team is ready to take off. Everybody else thinks they suck. Every power ranking, every Vegas over-under, everybody else thinks they suck. Where do you land on the spectrum?
I think they're in a crowded mediocrity bubble of the AFC. And look, I think realistically, I'm going to say the same thing about the Colts that I just said about the Titans. I don't think any of us really know how Anthony Richardson is going to look long-term for the Colts, because let's be real, the biggest knock on him coming out of the draft was he needed a bunch of reps. Did he get those last year because of the injury? The answer is no. Now, the Colts were able to put something together. Is that something they can replicate this year? I don't even know what Anthony Richardson's going to look like this year, so I have a little faith in them. The Jags have fallen off. For whatever reason, Trevor Lawrence hasn't been able to take that next step. We all know that. I don't have a lot of faith in them. So, I think the division, you can look around and say, okay, I think there's a lot of mediocrity. The Texans, obviously, last year gave everybody, reason to respect them. But the hard part for the Titans when it comes to the AFC conversation overall is that the rest of the conference has teams that I think are absolutely spectacular, right? Like, there are a ton of teams, whether we're talking about the fact that, I believe the Bengals and Browns both have enough talent on their rosters to win a Super Bowl, especially if Deshaun Watson can come together, that on top of the Ravens. So I see 3 playoff teams possibly from that one division. That's going to take 2 of your wild cards before we've even gotten to what's the rest of the AFC East looks like, and what difference does Harbaugh make for the Chargers. I don't think they're going to be very good. Everybody else disagrees with me. So you look across the board, I think that there's a group of teams that are probably 7-win teams in the AFC, 6, 7, 8-win teams in that range. That's where I think the Titans fall. I don't think the wheels are falling off. I also don't think they're there yet. It's going to take a minute to see what Will Levis looks like. And if he surprises all of us, then heck yeah, why not? They could win 8, 9 games. Like, absolutely. If he absolutely stinks, then they win 6 games, and we're trying to figure this whole thing out.
So if they win 7 games, do you think Titan fans will be happy?
No, I don't think any fan base is happy with 7 wins. I do think if they win 7, it's all about the how. If you win 7 games, but you feel like at the end of the year, man, things were clicking. Like, amazing to me how often winning 3 of your last 4 games sort of thing in November, December changes the way everybody feels about everything. If they are playing well at the end of the year and it looks like things have clicked with Levis in this offense and there are no questions about the quarterback, then Titans fans should be happy, because 7 can get to 10 pretty easy. You can get from 7 wins to 9 wins, maybe 10 wins, right? But, in my mind, it's all about the how and the way it looks. Like, if you're winning 7 games, but Will Levis was a disaster the whole time and you were having to compensate for him, now you got to figure out how you're going to get the replacement for Will Levis in a draft year that doesn't have great quarterbacks. Like, then it's frustrating. So I think so much of life is about quarterback development.
Fitz, how much do you buy into Pro Football Focus when it comes to grades on offensive linemen?
I think Pro Football Focus does as good a job as anybody can do, and they are a metric. I just don't think they are the golden god that so many people think they are, because the more that I talk to, like the Schwartzes and Gojo and, Marshall Newhouse and people in my life that played the position, the more they explain to you that so often communication and the ability to slide blocks left and right are things that just can't be judged. So, I think that makes it a difficult process. I think it's a good measure. I don't think it's the end-all be-all.
Fitz, last one for you. Do you care at all about this proposal the NFLPA is trying to push through about limiting OTAs and having an extended training camp and all the other stuff that they want, that they think is important, or does that matter to you?
So here's the only reason it matters, and I think it should matter to everybody a little bit, is it's the building block of their defense against an 18-game season, which we all know next year is going to try and be pushed through. But the one thing I've been told multiple times from other insiders is that the players are adamant that they want more time away from the facility as part of that 18-game trade-off. So this is step 1 in there. And what's interesting about it is I don't think it's an easy solution, because, as you know, being around the Titans, there are guys, especially young guys, that need to be at OTAs just to learn, but also to learn the playbook and also to figure out how to connect with some of the vet players that can help them learn how to be pros and things like that. So guys like that will suffer, and it'll be harder for fringe roster guys to make it. So I do think it's interesting that by pushing it back, they make it easier for some, but they make it harder for others. I've talked to a couple of players about that today, literally saying, I don't know if I'd even made it in the league if I didn't get those OTAs and those reps in front of coaches. So I think it could be difficult, but what I think this really needs to prepare everybody's mind for is this is the beginning of a very serious battle, because the owners want an 18th game, and they intend to get it. And if they're going to get an 18 game on a 20-game season, players want a lot in return. This is the very beginning of that.
Jason Fitz, as always, joining us on the program, Yahoo Sports, Fox Sports Radio. Fitz, great stuff. Appreciate you as always.
Appreciate you, brother. Have a great week.
Yep, 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones, your thoughts, 615-737-1025 here on the program. And There is one thing that kind of bothered me about OTAs today. I wasn't out there today, but there is one thing that did bother me. We will get to that coming up here on the program. Let's talk about Twice Daily. I love Twice Daily, and Twice Daily has your cravings, and you can save on every single visit. Stop in and get rewarded. All you need to do is join the Twice Daily Rewards program to unlock special discounts, savings, enter their sweepstakes, and so much more. Try their new wraps, and I do love their wraps. The Italian, the ham and cheddar, the turkey and Swiss, and the Nashville hot chicken. They're made to order with your favorite toppings, and when you download the Twice Daily app, you can order ahead. I have the Twice Daily app. I do that all the time. At Twice Daily, it's snack time all the time, and they've got favorites like chicken fingers, tater rounds, and their brand new, spanking new pretzels. Twice Daily. What are you craving? Is it a mistake if the Titans do not practice Radunz at right tackle, given that last year he was the best right tackle they had?
Jared, I think they have to practice him there. And if they practice him at guard as well, okay. You know, that's what I did, except I had to practice on both sides of the line and center. At least for Radunz, he'll practice on the right side with his right hand in the ground when he's in a three-point stance. And so but what you said about Nicholas Petit-Frere is the risk. You're right about that. I think that if he stays healthy, he'll have a better season than most people expect this year at right tackle. But the Titans can't count on that. What they do know is that last year, Dylan Radunz at right tackle fought like a crazed pit bull in a junkyard every single play. And he wasn't always good enough, but he fought. You know, I think that the Titans need Dylan Radunz to be ready to go at guard and tackle. And Daniel Brunskill was serviceable at right guard last year. And until Nicholas Petit-Frere proves that he's a solid right tackle, Radens might be the only next best choice.
That was Trevor yesterday on the program talking about Dylan Radens. And I don't know, I wasn't at OTAs today, so I don't know who's practicing where. But I do know that the Titans have said, hey, we want to see if Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT, we want to see if PT and if Jalen Duncan can play right tackle. And, you know, they got some traits. And maybe we'll see. And they've said, we think Radens is a guard. Let me say this. I think it is a massive, massive, massive mistake to not practice Dylan Radens at right tackle. Now, again, I wasn't at practice. I don't know who was practicing at right tackle. My gut tells me, again, this is just my gut, that John Ojukwu right now is the third option at right tackle, but I don't know. But I think it would be a massive mistake if they were to not have Dylan Radens prepared to play right tackle. And I asked Fitz, I said, how important is Pro Football Focus to you? And I remember, you know, when Fitz was working here, and Fitz was like, oh, Pro Football Focus, the teams, they pay the money for Pro Football. They love Pro Football Focus. But even he's like, look, it doesn't tell you everything. So let me give you that asterisk. But it does give you a good idea. Like Pro Football Focus will tell you that Andre Dillard is terrible. And I think they're right. Pro Football Focus grades for last season. Radens was 67.2. Nicholas Petit-Frere was 35.5, which is awful, by the way. And Jalen Duncan was worse at 32.9. In Nicholas Petit-Frere's rookie year, he was 52.3. Pass blocking, which is more important than run blocking. Pass blocking, 29.2. For Duncan, in PF last year, 27.8. And Radens, 59.7. It was not close, comparing the play of Dylan Radens at right tackle last year to the play of either Nicholas Petit-Frere or Jalen Duncan. Also, when Nicholas Petit-Frere played as a rookie, he had a grade of 52.3. Again, Radens, 67.2. 67.2 you can live with. It's not great. And Trevor has been on record saying that he thinks Radens' body type and his feet make him more of a guard than they do a tackle. But at the same time, you heard that cut right there. He's saying until PT proves that he can play right tackle, that like, okay, you are fine there at right tackle, he's going to have Radens in the mix. And that's coming from a guy who has not been very positive about Dylan Radens until the end of last year in Trevor. I concur 100%. I believe, and I've been on record and I will continue, I think Radens is going to end up being the right tackle of this team. But what I think they're going to do is I think they're going to try to get by with PT, and it's going to take them about 3 or 4 weeks, and the quarterback's going to get hit about 7 times because of it before they figure out, okay, guy, we got to get Radens out there. Dylan Radens has been in the NFL for 3 years now. And let's see, according to this, he has played in his career 162 snaps at left tackle, 322 snaps at left guard, 177 snaps at right guard, and 500 snaps at right tackle. Basically, he's played enough snaps at guard and tackle for me to feel comfortable that if I got to throw him into guard, I can. Practice him at tackle. I think it is a massive mistake to bank on unreliable Nicholas Petit-Frere and terrible Jalen Duncan and not have Radens out there. And again, I wasn't at OTAs today. It's voluntary. I know that Nicholas Petit-Frere was in the building last week, but he was rehabbing, which again, I think goes to the unavailability of Nicholas Petit-Frere. He was not seen at practice today. Jalen Duncan, not seen at practice today. PT is unreliable. Do not put all your eggs in his basket. They need to put Radens at right tackle in practice. They need to have Radens ready because, again, he's the best right tackle they've had over the last 2 years. The Radens they had at the end of last year is the best right tackle that they've had over the last 2 years. and they didn't get anybody new. And so once you do that, the old adage is you can't make the club in the tub. And I look, Nicholas Petit-Frere is going to be on the team. But at the same time, while he's going to be on the team, that doesn't mean he's good, and that doesn't mean that he's going to be available or reliable. One texter says, Jared, wasn't Dylan Radins a false start machine last year? Yes, he was. Dylan Radins committed 11 penalties last year, which is really bad, including 3 in the Miami game. But if I wanted to be optimistic about this, and people are saying, Jared, be more optimistic, so let me be more optimistic about this. He only had 1 penalty in his last 5 games of the year last year. Maybe got a little bit better. And you guys always tell me, well, Bill Callahan can do it. Why can't Bill Callahan take Radins and make him better? If he can take the other guys and make them better, why can't he do it with Radins? AJ has been holding patiently and is up next. Thank you for calling. What's up, AJ?
Hey, what's going on? How y'all doing?
Good, go ahead.
Look. I need you to sell me the Titans like you do that twice daily commercial. Man, look, we can't go around just, talking about, I think they might suck. I think this right here. Of course, we know it's a new coach, the GM, second year. There's a whole lot of ins and outs and pieces and players. We know it can be some ups. We know it can be some downs. Like everybody high on the CJ Stroud. It was his first year. How many quarterbacks he came and did that first year? But it's the second year, since we got a lot of tape on you, it tells a lot. Who's to say that Will Levis might be the reverse? His first year may not have been so great, but that second year may be good. Who's to say that Brian Callahan is what the team's been looking for, to air it back out, like go back to the Air McNair days where the ball was thrown around, have a little bit more fun with it. But, man, if I'm trying to turn somebody on to the Titans, I'm trying to tell them to listen to your radio station, oh, my God.
AJ, let me say this, man. AJ, let me tell you this. Who's to say they're not going to win the Super Bowl this year?
I feel like my expectation with them is this right here. I'm not getting myself too high and I'm not getting myself too low. Just because I know it's
You just start talking about the Air McNair days.
But I'm just telling you.
Hey, look, I hope the Titans are good this year. I have no idea how good they're going to be. I have no idea how bad they're going to be. I'm not like everybody who says they're going to suck. I just cannot, AJ, thank you. I just cannot just say, oh, they're going to be great. It's going to be Steve McNair. I can't do that. I can't do that. The one thing you did hit on that I'm going to kind of agree with, but be a little cautious in agreeing with, is let's hold off until year 2 before we decide CJ Stroud is all that in a bag of chips. Because he had a great rookie year, but everything was new, right? Slowick was new. He had the receivers. He had the tight end. He had the line. Let's see year 2. When more is put on his plate, let's see how CJ Stroud does. But this idea of like, oh, man, this is going to be like Steve McNair. And, do you really – they don't have a right tackle. Unbelievable. One texter says, imagine thinking you know more than Bill Callahan. Yeah, well, if you're banking on Nicholas Petit-Frere, he can't even get out on the field. And I know that because I watched it the last 2 years. Bill Callahan didn't. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Jared versus Joe is up next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. 5 o'clock on a Wednesday. Caroline is with us for Jared versus Joe. Hello, Caroline.
Hello, how we doing?
Outstanding. Joe is with us. Joe, before we get into debating, I would like to know what happened today at Titans OTAs. Give us the rundown in 60 seconds. Go.
Nothing. How about nothing? Yeah, there was some throwing, there was some stretching, there was some
catching.
There was some catching. There was some comparing. I don't know if you saw this, but some comparing of Traylon Burks to, let's see, T.O., A.J. Brown, and, oh my gosh, who else did Calvin Ridley say? It was like
Julio.
He said, yeah, there you go, Julio Jones. So there you go.
I did hear that.
Traylon Burks no longer needs to worry about A.J. Brown comparisons. It's also T.O. and Julio. So, sure.
The A.J. Brown or the Traylon Burks hype train continues, the hype tour for the Titans' fourth receiver. With that being said, it is time for Jared versus Joe.
Jared Stillman versus Joe Rexrode. Now on Stillman and Company.
On ESPN.
102.5 The Game.
Jared versus Joe is being presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville, Caroline.
I do appreciate Calvin Ridley saying Titan fans have nothing to worry about with Traylon Burks. I'm like, Calvin, you're new here, okay? Like, you haven't been here the last
Well,
few years.
I mean, they don't need Calvin Ridley to tell them because the text line today, I mean,
You pissed them off?
Well, that whole Sports Illustrated story that Brian Callahan said that Will Levis is better than Caleb Williams, even though he didn't say it, he said it. Like in it, they go over all these throws from the Atlanta game, and it's like a drop by Chig, a drop by Burks, another drop by Burks. I'm like, oh yeah, those guys can't catch. I forgot about that. But then everybody tells me how great they are all the time, and that's just like last offseason where I drank the Kool-Aid. This year I'm not. Go ahead, Caroline. Sorry.
Well, I will piggyback off of that. We heard SI.com, Albert Breer's article, where Brian Callahan said, essentially, in as many words, Will Levis would have been the best quarterback coming out of this year's draft, which is strong. Do we buy it? Jared, you go first.
I'm starting to not believe Brian Callahan because everything that everybody does is great, right? So everything about Levis has been nothing but positive, right? He's made of the right stuff. He's a hard worker. He's really good. He's got great talent. He's taking it to the grass. He's good. Last week, Joe asked him about PT, and he was like, he's been great. They asked him about Devondre Sweat, who hadn't been out on the practice field, the two open OTA. He's been great. I mean, Traylon Burks, he's been great. Everything is great. Everybody's awesome. It's starting to become too much. It is not a Frosted Flakes commercial. Like, at some point, you got to kind of keep it real. Hey, we're really looking for this out of this guy. Or, again, you don't throw anybody under the bus. Today, he was asked about Calvin Ridley, said everything we thought he'd be and more. That's the quote, right, Joe? Joe's not even listening, I guess. But
yes, I was muted. I'm even muting myself on your show. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Everything we thought and more. Everybody's great. Great. At some point, when you say everybody's great, I stop believing it. So, I mean, look, I'm not a Caleb Williams fan. I would have liked to have the number 2 pick in the draft, not the number 1 pick, because I would have had to draft Williams number 1 because he is such a talent. And I think he's kind of, I think he's off the reservation a little bit. And I don't like that in my quarterback. But I'd still take Caleb Williams over Will Levis, and I like Will Levis. But I'd still take Caleb Williams. Ridiculous. That quote was ridiculous. And it's like, and he couches it with the exact wording of it, where he says, if Will's coming out in this draft class, I don't know. At this point, if those guys are better. So he really couches it. I don't buy it.
Okay. So just to be clear, when you say, do you buy it? Like, are you asking if I buy that Callahan actually believes that, Caroline?
Yes.
Well, I'll say this. I hear what Jared's saying. I mean, you could be, I guess, a little less praiseful or whatever. I don't know. He's not going to criticize anyone. I mean, most coaches wouldn't. I guess some would be more likely to than others. But I do think that you're putting these things all together, Jared, and they don't belong together. You know, I mean, just answering a question about someone like, oh, yeah, doing great, doing a good job out there. Yep, a couple sentences. That's happening with a lot of guys. The stuff he said about Levis, and again, it's not just the Breer thing, but you've got the Bus with the boys said that's a big part of why he took the job. I don't know. He said so many interviews, and he's gone above and beyond just like, yeah, he's doing great. I really like Will. I mean, look, I do buy that he has a high level of excitement for Will Levis and that it has been strengthened by their time working together. So do I buy that, like, if Brian Callahan were sitting there and it's like, here you go, Caleb Williams, and he's your quarterback to start this tenure with, or you can just keep Will Levis or whoever. You can go down the list if you want to go to Drake May or Jaden Daniels or whatever. Do I buy 100% absolutely? He's just like, no, thank you. I'm taking number 8. Nah, I don't know about that. I mean, I guess again, at this point, I agree with Jared. That's a qualifier. That I said that this morning on the show. I'm like, let's not forget the at this point that he said, right? Like Levis has gone through a season of taking some hits, going through the weekly preparation, and that stuff all should help you be more advanced than a rookie right now. But do I buy that? Like, do I think he's BSing and it's just coach speak crap about Levis? Not at all. I think, and I don't think it should be grouped in the way Jared's grouping it in with just the general positivity when he's asked about random anybody's out there.
I mean, it does kind of, like, I'm trying to figure out with Brian Callahan, though, if I need to take his words seriously, if there's like things to read between the lines. You know, again, Vrabel could be so passive aggressive sometimes that it was pretty obvious to kind of, as we used to call it, speak Vrabelese. And I don't know Brian Callahan that well yet. So I'm not like, you know, I don't have the scripture of how to follow everything he says yet. But there's also a part of me that thinks that like listening to Brian Callahan is like listening to a home team radio broadcast, right? Like, everything is good. Nothing is bad. Everybody's great. That interception was a bad bounce off the guy's hand. Like, that kind of thing. Well, it was windy that day. Like, I am worried that it's that. And, you know, I absolutely hate that stuff. And I do wonder if Callahan is maybe doing that a little. And you know this as well as anybody, Joe, that the way teams go about hiring coaches is if you had a hard ass, you turn around and you hire Butch Jones. If you have Butch Jones, you turn around and hire a disciplinarian. That's what you do. You know, it's just and it feels to me like this guy's a 180 from Vrabel, and I'm starting to think that like maybe it's a little too positive. Like it's maybe getting to the point to where it's a little head up tush, and I don't like that.
Wow,
like, what's wrong with
Vrabel's?
What's wrong with a straight shooter?
Answers.
Well, what's wrong with a straight shooter? Vrabel wasn't a straight shooter, but what's wrong with a straight shooter?
Well, I'll tell you what. Maybe, and we'll see. You know, if they start losing and they get beat by 20, and it's like, you know, it's like putting a positive spin on everything. Okay, well then that to me will be a much better test. I mean, again, right now it's the spring and everybody's out there working and whatever. So we'll see on that, but I'll still. I mean, I don't think you should dismiss the fact that he's giving detailed answers too. Like he's actually giving insight. I mean, today Terry McCormick had a throw-in question at the end about like, you know, a question you should have loved, a big center, and
we couldn't hear it. They didn't have they didn't stream the press conference today.
Well, go back and read his answer. It's like a really good football answer of some things I hadn't really thought about. Like, that's the type of stuff he's doing.
Well, what was the question, Joe?
Do we really have time for this?
Well, what did he say? Just tell us what the question was.
So he asked him about the benefit of having a bigger center over a more athletic center. And basically, Callahan talked about how he's always been a huge believer in more size at the expense of athleticism in there just because you can't let your pocket get pushed and that your quarterback has nowhere to go in turn. It was a good answer. It was a good football. He's giving detailed answers on with some insight, and so right now I'll definitely take that.
I will say this about Brian Callahan's effusive praise of Will Levis. I do believe that at this point he's married himself to the quarterback. So if things don't go well, the plausible deniability of, well, I didn't draft him, I didn't scout him, that's not my guy, that's gone. He doesn't get that because he's been too over the top. He's been too over the top in how in love he is with the guy.
We know why, Caroline? So Jared can line another person up to be fired by Jared. Here we go. Let's do it.
I think that it's the biggest cop-out. Like the guys in Chicago that were hired to fix Justin Fields and didn't. And it's like, well, we didn't draft Justin Fields, so give us Caleb Williams. It's like, oh, God. And this is how the Titans end up playing musical blame. Where, 1 year it's the coach's fault, the next year it's the GM's fault, next year it's the quarterback's fault, then reset. And then you keep having coaches and GMs that don't want to work together, and it's just a disaster. Although, then again, it was the worst day of Rand Carthon's family's life when Mike Vrabel got fired, according to Bussin' with the Boys. So, who knows? Caroline, what's next?
I think, at least for me with Brian Callahan, like, if Will Levis throws 3 interceptions against the Bears and Brian Callahan still wants to paint a rosy and rainbow picture, like, that's when I'll start to have a problem. But for now, I can't get too up in arms about it, but I digress. You mentioned the wide receivers off the top, going back to some receivers. DeAndre Hopkins, allegedly, I don't follow DeAndre Hopkins, nor do I check his social media accounts regularly, but allegedly, he scraped all of Titans-related content from his Instagram page. From a scale of nothing burger, to use your term, Joe, to, oh my gosh, this is, red alert, where does your concern level lie with DeAndre Hopkins not being at OTAs today and scrubbing his socials of Titans content?
Robbie did check it, by the way, and it's true. Well, actually, the only thing he I guess he hadn't really looked at it before, but he definitely saw no signs of Titans anything there, so, which is, of course,
I saw that too, but if there was no Titans stuff to begin with, then this truly is a nothing burger.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to assume there was something. I'm going to assume that he had any action photos from last year, like anything like that.
Apparently, he still does. He pulled down a couple of pictures, according to a texter. I don't know if this is true or not because I don't keep up with DeAndre's Instagram. Apparently, 3 months ago, he took down a couple of Titans pictures, and there are still some pictures inside of slideshows, like picture 3 of 10 is a picture of him in a Titans uniform, but that's it.
Okay. Well, okay, then I'm sorry that I have to qualify my answer. If it's just him not being OTAs, then I'm going nothing where, he can show up at minicamp, be fine. Now, if there has been some intentional scrubbing, then I'd go I'd go around a 5. I'd go around the middle because look, it makes sense. He's under contract for 1 more year. And if I'm him, I'm like, step up and not only give me an extension, pay me more than you paid me last year because I outperformed my deal. I'm a freaking Hall of Fame receiver who just had another great season for you. So, I mean, I think there is a real possibility that there's some discontent, and he has every right to feel that way.
So I actually agree with about 95% of what Joe said. DeAndre Hopkins doesn't have to go to OTAs because OTAs, you only, in my opinion, have to go if you signed a big contract the previous offseason. So Chidobe Awuzie has to be there. Lloyd Cushenberry has to be there. Those guys have to be there. Hopkins didn't. And you only have to be, like, if you're the quarterback has to be there. Other than that, you don't have to be there. And DeAndre is the type of veteran who doesn't have to be there. That being said, the only 2 ways to show disappointment or disagreement with the organization, because you can't hold out anymore, are to miss the voluntary stuff like Kevin Byard did last year and to scrub your social media like DeAndre's buddy Kyler did when he was in Arizona. Those are the only 2 things you can do. He wasn't there, and his social media doesn't have any Titan stuff. And to Joe's point, he does deserve a new contract. I mean, like, if you were to say, hey, DeAndre's unhappy with his contract, I would say DeAndre should be unhappy with his contract. DeAndre is set to make $14 million this year. That would make him the 24th highest paid receiver, tied with Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney. And I think Darnell Mooney stinks. So, like, Gabe Davis, I think he's kind of a one-trick pony. I mean, he's faster than D-Hop, but I'd rather have DeAndre. DeAndre should be making, in today's climate, DeAndre should be making about 18 to 20 million bucks a year. And I believe that the Titans should be wanting to give him an extension because I think that they should want him to continue to grow the chemistry with Levis. And I think he'll age well. And I don't want them to get to Nico Autry, where he has a good year this year and then go somewhere else because you didn't sign him on the front end. So as far as like how big of a deal is it? I don't know, probably like a 3 because he was there last week. And it's not like he's openly, actively complaining. But at the same time, he's not making enough money. And the Titans should want to extend him and give him a little more money this year in order to get him under contract for next year so he can't just walk away like Danico did. And DeAndre doesn't have to be at OTAs. But if DeAndre wanted a new contract, I'd be on his side. So, again, that's an agreement with Joe. Not sure I like those. More Jared versus Joe to continue next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game.
Stillman versus Joe Rexroad. Now on Stillman and Company.
On ESPN.
102.5 The Game.
Versus Joe, presented by Bella Windows and Doors in Nashville. Caroline.
Concern level for D-Hop and his socials, but he was not the only one that was not there at OTAs today. Tavondre Sweat not at OTAs. Luxurious Sneed not at OTAs. Nicholas Petit Frere, a.k.a.
PT.
Thank you. Was not at OTAs today. What is your concern level for those three?
Who's going first?
Jarrett.
I mean, with Sneed, don't we all think that's kind of the deal here? You know, it's like buying a car without a clean title. The Carfax, not very good, the accident history, and you have to accept that it's a dented car, and that's why you're getting it, and that's why you got L'Jarius Sneed for a third-round pick in next year's draft. So I don't expect to see L'Jarius Sneed out there until, maybe a little bit for the mandatory minicamp and then a training camp beginning, and then rest them babies up to see if he can go 17 games this year. So while I think that the fans, I had a caller call in today that said that L'Jarius Sneed's knees are fine, and the reason they got him for a third-round pick in next year's draft is because Kansas City didn't want to pay him, which is redonkulous. But, again, I think that's just reality with Sneed. He's got bad knees. We know it. It's not bad to say it. It's okay. So that I don't have that big a problem with. The other two, Tavondre Sweat, yeah, I'm worried. The biggest problem with Tavondre Sweat was he's overweight. And what happens when you're overweight? You get hurt. That is always something that people – one practice and he gets hurt. I mean, he is on the Traylon Burks path of not being available for OTAs as a rookie. Everybody saying, no, it'll be fine. And we know how that worked out. And then with Nicholas Petit Frere, all you guys are putting your chips in the middle on PT, and it's I hate to say it, but you can't make the club if you're in the tub. And his biggest problem, other than he's not very good, his biggest problem is he's unreliable. And it's he couldn't play last year because of the gambling. Then he got hurt. Now here he is, and he's hurt again. And it's are we really going to put all our chips in the middle with this guy? Because it feels like that's what they're doing, because Jalen Duncan is not good. So, I mean, Sneed, whatever. Sweat, he's on the Traylon Burks path, and that ain't a good thing. And then with PT, it's I think his biggest problem is he's not reliable, and he can't get out there for OTAs. And I always think the guys that have to be there at OTAs are the guys that just got paid, the quarterback, and the guys that are competing for jobs. He's competing for a job, and he can't get out on the field. That's a concern.
Well, my answer hasn't changed a ton from last time, but I mean, Petit Frere, I'd say the longer this goes, it is concerning. I agree that he needs to be out there. He needs to be competing. The injury was a long time ago, so I think there's some level of concern there just in that, he needs these reps. And if they're going to have an answer at right tackle, maybe it's not him, but it would sure help them to have him out there to give them max competition and possibilities. Sneed, it would be great to see him out there. I think he's going to miss probably a lot of practice, which is what has happened in the past. I'm not too concerned at this point about Sweat. And I think it's, for you to tie this to Traylon Burks, I understand it's a rookie. I mean, Burks is a receiver.
An out-of-shape rookie.
Yeah, but actually, Tavondre Sweat, when I saw him, I was impressed with the shape he was in. I am impressed with the shape he's in. His first performance out there for rookie minicamp was impressive. It was oh wow, he looks like he's in pretty good shape. Look at him move. It was Traylon Burks can't finish a drill, and he's over there taking oxygen. I mean that's really a pretty bad comparison. Now Sweat was on the field last Monday. They do a little video of him catching a pass. He did something. So you could go out there and have a shoulder strain or whatever, a hamstring pull, and you're out a couple weeks. So I'm not – the concern level is very low with him because the first glimpse was actually very encouraging.
I don't know if I'd say very encouraging. He ran around the bag a couple of times. And
it sure as hell wasn't Traylon Burks. I mean, the Traylon Burks first glimpse was this guy is a first-round pick who's supposed to be A.J. Brown, who's a wide receiver. I mean, a 360-pound defensive lineman is going to have some extra weight on him, right? It was quite impressive.
I mean, the hope would be that he doesn't have the extra weight on him and that he is at 360 pounds where he's supposed to be.
I don't know what the number was, but he looked like a dude who can play right now in the first time.
Well, he's obviously not where he wants
moving.
to be, or else he would have gone up to the podium that day and said, I'm 346, and that's exactly where they want me to be.
I disagree. I don't think he's ever gonna say a number the rest of his career. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's the sense I get. He's not talking numbers.
My thing with Burks was after he had that rookie mini camp disaster that all you scribes told us, well, it was hot, and he has asthma. After that, he didn't really practice much at all in the OTAs. Like, remember, he'd always be out running, on the treadmill, or he'd be in the training room or whatever during OTAs. And that's kind of how I feel about Sweat. We saw him at the rookie minicamp, but after that, he's been a no-show. And I think that, again, this has to do with his shape, that he got into one real practice that Monday, that the rookies got into the OTAs in phase 3, and he got hurt. And, I mean.
Right. But you're just speculating, Jared. You're just purely speculating.
I know he got hurt.
You can be.
Paul said you can have. Brian Callahan said he got hurt, Joe.
Right, but you're saying because of his shape, you can have 2% body fat and tear an ACL and separate a shoulder and pull a hamstring and twist an ankle and break a finger and all those things.
So I'm just supposed to assume the best.
You're just making crap up.
So I'm not supposed to assume what is most likely. So I'm not supposed to assume what is most likely, that the guy that is 20 pounds overweight ended up with a minor injury.
How many pounds? You
20.
got a number? Oh, he's 20? How do you
Didn't
know that?
Didn't he say he'd be a Hall of Famer at 340?
I think he said 350.
Okay, well, he's 366. So round up.
Yeah, that's what he's officially listed at. Yeah, you're speculating that he got an injury because he's overweight, because you don't know that.
She asked if I'm concerned. I'm concerned. I don't know.
Well,
maybe Traylon Burks didn't make it through the drills because it was hot that day, Joe. I don't know. I just know Traylon Burks didn't practice in the OTAs and was out of shape at the beginning, and he has sucked. And that worries me because I am worried that Tavondre Sweat, with all his red flags, I'm not worried about it. He can get on the field. If they can get him to the church on time, I'm not worried about the sermon. I am worried about whether or not he will be available for this football club, and right now he's not. And one of the many reasons that people were worried about him going into the draft was his size. And the reason that people are worried about people in the NFL that are overweight are for two reasons. Number one, you can't run as much. And number two, you get hurt. And so right now, he hasn't been at the 2 practices because he's hurt. I'm worried about it.
Must be. It must be an overweight injury. Must be. He pulled his stomach, says Jared. Dr. Jared.
Maybe. Caroline, what's next?
Okay, Rand Carthon was on with Bussin' with the Boys. A few things that stood out to me. Joe, you go first. He said they knew that Michael Penix Jr. was going to Atlanta, that they had that on their board, that it was the most accurate board he's ever seen, that Calvin Ridley picked the Titans because of the vibe and the feel, how it felt like a family. His wife or girlfriend, I forgot what Rand Carthon said, is from Huntsville, and that Brian Callahan had a depth chart of his coaching options, and he got the number 1 option at every single coaching position. Do we believe it?
Believe all of those?
You are more than welcome to break each individual point down if you would like.
Well, I mean, I can't believe you'd make up the Penix thing. Although, also, like, how the heck would you know that? That's wild. But like, you're making that up. I mean, the one of those that I'm like, come on, there had to be like one B choice would have to be the coach's depth chart, right? Like really, like there wasn't one plan B of the whole bunch. That seems a little far. What was the other one? What was the middle one?
Calvin Ridley.
Didn't sign for the money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I don't doubt that Ridley said, "Hey, I love the atmosphere. My girlfriend's from nearby. It's a factor." Okay, I could buy it as a factor, but I mean, come on. No, I mean, if I'm Calvin Ridley, I'm going where I'm getting paid at least as much as anywhere else, preferably more than anywhere else. So I'm not saying zero factor. You just take the biggest check and have a crap situation that you can't stand. But, money talks more than anything and should talk more than anything.
I love the fact that, I mean, I think we can all agree Joe usually gives the benefit of the doubt to everybody. Caroline, again, we don't know that they didn't have Michael Penix. That. Well, we don't know that they didn't have Michael Penix 8th on their board to Atlanta. But,
yes. I'm sorry that I'm not recklessly accusatory like you.
And even you're
go on, please.
Even you're yeah, it's all bull crap. I mean, the idea that they got every top choice for assistant coach means one of two things. Either they're lying, which I think is true, or they didn't have a very good pool of assistant coaches to choose from because nobody else wanted them or nobody else could have paid them more. And I just think that's ridiculous. And I think the idea that they knew Penix was going 8 or had the inkling that Penix was going 8 to Atlanta because they sat down and talked about team needs and thought Falcons could go quarterback, even though they just gave Kirk Cousins $160 million, that's ridiculous too. And then the craziest part about the Calvin Ridley thing was Ridley said it was about the money. It's dude, you don't have to lie about that. It'll be okay. We all know he picked the money. It's fine. It's fine. This isn't
he picked it for the money.
Right. This isn't
in his press conference.
This isn't like Anna Nicole Smith trying to justify why she married that old guy. It's okay. It's a business. Sometimes people pick jobs because of the money. It's okay. And I did laugh.
I'd have to hear the clip from Carthon. Again, if Ridley said, I really love this place. I love what you guys have going on. That was a big factor. Okay. I mean, I'm sure that was discussed, right? He didn't just completely pull that out of thin air. But, yeah, like you said, I mean, he actually mentioned the money when he was asked about it.
Yeah, Ridley was when he was asked about why the Titans, he was well, I thought I was going to go back to Jacksonville, but, there were just a lot of things, and the money was pretty good too. Ha, ha, ha. It's he's telling you right there. It's the money. I just do love the fact that Rand Carthon, I went crazy about that yesterday, about those cuts, and it's just I just can't take anything you say seriously. When you say things like that are so obviously not true, and I was surprised, even the text line was yeah, it's a little too much for me, because normally the text line gets mad at me. I was shocked by that. Caroline, who wins this week?
Well, the craziest thing is when, it was either Taylor Lewan or Will Compton or both of them said, so big coach or Bill. And Rand was actually, no, not him. And I'm well, that's the only one that I could justify being your number one option and your number one choice. It's your dad, and he's the best coach at that position group, which just so happens to be the number one position of need for the Tennessee Titans.
Also, in that same cut, Rand admitted to a tampering charge because he said in the interview that he said to Brian Callahan, hey, the elephant in the room, are we going to get your dad? And it's yeah, you can't say that because he's under contract with the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, even though everybody knows, you can't say that. And so not only was it kind of bullcrap, but he admitted to a tampering charge that could probably cost the Titans a 6th-round pick if Cleveland really cared about it. Hilarious. Caroline, who wins?
So Jared wins today because I don't think that it is that crazy to think that a guy that came in overweight could have gotten hurt from being overweight or is not out on the field because of his weight. Am I saying it absolutely is?
It's not crazy.
No?
It's not crazy, but Jared's saying it like it's fact. See,
no, you were treating it like it was crazy, like I wasn't allowed to be concerned about it.
No. It's not crazy, but you don't know that. An injury can happen
Joe.
to anybody. That's fine. I'm glad Jared wins. He freaking needed one. He hasn't had one since COVID. So congrats, Jared. Good job.
Haven't had one since Schmuck was a pup. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for Jared versus Joe, 615-737-1025. I do not know how to take the positivity, the sunshine pumping surrounding the Titans. Now, I don't think the Titans will be awful. All the national media says, they're going to be terrible. They're going to be worse team in the league than I. But just the barrage of just everything's great, making me a little nervous. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
All right, pop-up draft time on this topic. League-wide, quarterbacks with the most tenuous grip on their starting jobs entering the season. We know we've got several months before the season starts, but let's fast forward. We get to week 1. Who is in the most precarious position? Shireen, you get the first selection.
I'm going to go with Will Levis. You know, the Titans have had a good offseason, but it still comes down to the quarterback. They had several injuries. He had several injuries last season, couldn't stay on the field, right foot, quad injury, high ankle sprain. Same thing we were talking about Anthony Richardson, figuring out how to protect yourself and stay on the field. He went 3-6 as a starter. He has to learn a new system, all those things. Mason Rudolph looks serviceable. I mean, I think we know what Mason Rudolph is, and there's a reason that the Steelers didn't re-sign him. I get all that. But he played as good as he has played in his career last year. He went 3-0, just 3 touchdowns, but no interceptions. He's serviceable. You can win with Mason Rudolph with, I think, the team that they have built around Will Levis. So Will Levis is going to get a shot, but it's just like we were talking about with Daniel Jones. He's not going to get a ton of time. If they start out 1-3, 1-4, they're going to pull the plug and probably put Mason Rudolph in there.
Shireen, not Mason Rudolph. Oh, no. But I do want to hit on this, which is when I hear something like that, I get very defensive because I don't think Will Levis sucks. Because I think Will Levis deserves a chance. And I think there are a lot of people in the national media that are not willing to give Will Levis a chance. And I don't think it's fair. I think Will Levis played the way you would expect any rookie quarterback to play. He had a terrible team around him, and thus a lot of the results were terrible. But man, did he show some flashes of talent. Which takes me to my overall issue with the Titans. And that is, if you were to give me something like what Shireen Williams said right there on Pro Football Talk about Will Levis, I'm going to push back against it because I think that's ridiculous. If you tell me you think the Titans are the worst team in the league, I'm going to push back on that because New England is worse than the Titans. Carolina is worse than the Titans. There are a lot of teams that I think are worse than the Titans. But what's happened is a lot of people are complaining about, in the text line about the program, saying, you've become too negative. And I don't think it's about me. What I worry about is in the season of optimism, which is the spring where you can't lose a game, I feel like there is a culture of positivity that is starting to fester with the Titans. I think it starts at the top, where I don't think they want to hear anything negative. That's why everything that comes out of that building is positive, positive, positive. Listen to one of their podcasts. It's all great. Every interview they do, good, good, good. Taylor Lewan, who threw a fit at the idea that the Titans would fire Mike Vrabel, saying it would be the biggest decision, worst decision they ever made, the biggest mistake they'd ever make, is now lapping it up with his buddies on the bus, and he's thinking they're going to win the AFC South. And I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't just tell you it's going to be all right when you don't have a right tackle. And so what I worry about, though, is, look, fans are going to be fans. Fans are going to think their team can win all the time. Fans are going to defend coaches they like. Fans are going to scream about coaches. It's going to be that way all the time. But when it comes to the Titans, and when it comes to this culture of toxic positivity, I am afraid that it actually seeps into the minds of the decision makers. That there is a false sense of security. That there is this inflated sense of self. That, we went out and spent $150 million this year. Our farts don't smell. And I don't like that. That's what gets you into trouble. I like John Robinson a lot. I think John Robinson, and I'm talking about John Robinson, the guy. And I think John Robinson should get a second crack at it. Because I do want to see, if he were to get another job, what he would have learned from the mistakes he made with the Titans. But I felt like there was a shift after the 2019 season with him and Vrabel, where everything they did was right and nothing that they did could be questioned. And that's what leads to Caleb Farley. That's what leads to Julio Jones. This just unrelenting belief that everything we do is right. And look, there's a lot of, risk that's involved with all of these players. And look, even the healthiest guy can get hurt, but there's more risk with L'Jarius Sneed, for instance, than there is with Lloyd Cushenberry, who has not spent a lot of time being hurt in his career. But what happens is you start talking yourself into the good, and then you decide that the good is fact. And when you do that, I think you start to make a lot of dumb decisions. And so, again, when I hear Brian Callahan intimate things like, hey, I think Will Levis is better than Caleb Williams. Whoa, boy, chill out, hold on. And I feel like if I don't push back against that, if common sense doesn't prevail, then we're going to have a lot of people that think the Titans are going to go 13-4 this year, and it's going to be a disaster. And like I've said, the current administration needs to learn from the mistakes of the previous administration. Sometimes I'm not sure they do that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 through the game. Stillman and Company. So Connor, we've been on the air now for, 3 hours and 53 minutes?
About right, yeah.
Okay. Have we mentioned at any point today the Milwaukee Admirals or the AHL playoffs?
No, we have not.
Okay. So tonight at 7:30, the Dallas Stars take on the Edmonton Oilers. Dallas can take a commanding 3-1 lead. I did stay up last night, even though I had a massive headache. I stayed up last night, and I did watch Laviolette and and New York lose to Florida. That series tied 2-2. Boy, I was pulling for the Rangers last night, and that series has been incredibly entertaining. So tonight, I will be watching the Edmonton Oilers versus the Dallas Stars. Some nights we've had the choose between basketball. If you're like me and you got YouTube TV, you can watch both at the same time. But there is no basketball tonight because basketball played yesterday and the Celtics swept Indiana, so there's no Game 5 in that series. So tonight at 7:30, I'll be watching NHL hockey. I heard the midday show today, closed their show, breaking down the Milwaukee Admirals series against Coachella Valley that apparently starts today. And Willie said, I know Jared says he doesn't care, but he cares. Let me just say this, Willie, I love you, but I will be watching NHL hockey tonight, not AHL hockey. I am not interested in watching AHL hockey, especially knowing that the goalie's hurt. I am not interested in that. NHL hockey, I can watch, and I'll be rooting for Edmonton, because for some reason I don't like Dallas. Not AHL hockey. Stillman and Company, that's it for us. We'll see you tomorrow at 2.